All right, on today's show, I'm going to be talking to a return guest, Eric Morris Eskenazi. He has a company called Brooklyn Digital Media, where it's very multimedia music. His podcast, Erratic Dispatches, his films, his book, An Insignificant Man, is on Amazon. And he's really obsessed with the year 1981, I think. With all the research I've been doing, I think I'm becoming obsessed with the movies, the music, the events of that year. So we're going to spend a whole episode dedicating to just putting a microscope on top of 1981. And you'll have to decide if it's the sleaziest year of all time in entertainment. So welcome to the show, Eric.
Hey, Kelly. It's great talking to you again after 4
Why
months.
did you... oh my God, lots happened in 4 months.
Yeah, a lot.
Is New York still standing?
Oh, yeah, we're still standing, yeah.
I think we were talking about how... What was there? The so-called exodus out of New York that may or may not have really happened.
Yeah, it's people moving out, but rents aren't really changing. People say some certain parts of the city, the rents are lowering, but still very expensive here. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what's going to happen the rest of the
You're
year.
in Brooklyn.
Here. Right. Yeah, a lot of gentrification going on.
And they're going to start shooting that news. Well, maybe if you hang out outside, you can be an extra in the Sex and the City reboot.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They're going to shoot that here. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you like your city being symbolized by the Sarah Jessica Parker character?
I would prefer if it was her character from like Square Pegs. Like she just comes here and she just totally freaks out, like in the early 80s, 82, 83, when that show took place, when it was still sleazy, because I know in an interview she said that character from Square Pegs and then from Sex and the City, she said it could be the same character in a way. So, but I prefer her when she was in Square Pegs.
So Sex and the City, even though you're a guy, would you be Carrie, Charlotte, Miranda, or Samantha?
Who's the brunette? I forgot which character that is.
Charlotte.
Charlotte. I'd probably be Charlotte. Because she was in that actress, she was in an exploitation film that was shot in New Jersey in the 80s. I don't know if you've seen that one. They shot it in a like a abandoned asylum in New Jersey. It's pretty fun.
Oh, wow. Because she's the one that, wasn't she also on, like, Melrose Place?
Probably, yeah.
Didn't she have, like, a small part on that? Or, like,
I think so, right?
limited? I just like her because she's the most, I don't know, they're all kind of neurotic and obsessive about just the most minute little things, but she seems to be the sweetest. She seems to have the nicest heart. So
yeah, I had to
that's
look
good
up
that you identified
movie.
with the.
Oh, I was going to say I could look it up right now if you want.
Well, moving
I think maybe
on.
it's called
So
Dune. Okay, no problem.
Well, look it up when you get it. Just shout it out. But what we're going to do here, we've got a little format for the episode. We're going to talk about the current events of 1981, what's going on in the world, what music we're listening to. Then we're going to get deep into our little movie back and forth. Eric, you have some movies you want to bring up that you think were sort of key movies of that year. I've got some, mostly horror exploitation, but a few surprises. There are actually a couple of kind of fun comedies that year, a couple documentaries. All right. Oh, and some TV stuff too. But in case you didn't know, 81, especially for the Gen Yers who weren't even born then, these were the big things happening in the world back then. Lady Diana married Prince Charles, and she became Princess Diana. That was 1981. MTV premiered on August 1st. Changed everything. The Space Shuttle Columbia, the first space shuttle mission, very big. In Poland, they declared martial law. That was pretty major. Our first female justice on the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor. That was a milestone. Pope John Paul II was shot, but not killed, in Vatican City. Ronald Reagan took office. I think the DeLorean car debuted. The American hostages in Iran were released after over a year. The air traffic controllers went on strike. Not the best time to fly. The first test tube baby in the U.S. I don't know if that was the conception or the delivery of. Maybe it all happened in the same year. There were riots in the UK. Post-it notes were launched. Can you believe it? Before 1981, we didn't have Post-it notes. And MS-DOS was released by Microsoft.
Wow.
Oh, my God. So are there any other notable events you remember from 81 that I didn't mention?
Well, did you probably mention that did you mention that when Reagan got shot? His failed assassination that year? You might have mentioned that, but maybe sorry.
Was that the same year? Like, was that later, like in the fall?
Early. It was like early 80, maybe March of 81. So a few months after his inauguration.
Oh.
He was I remember watching that on the news. Wow. And then
I kind of remember being in school at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, remember in school before we had internet and everything was delayed reaction, and if there was a big world event, you know, someone from the office would come into your room and slip the teacher a note and say, this big thing happened. You might want to mention it to the students.
Or sometimes they would have a TV.
I kind of remember I was in like right, they'd cart in the TV on a little cart. I think they did that during the first moon landing. We got to see that in school. Well, wasn't it because of that, you know, Nancy Reagan supposedly, you know, had an astrologer that she would always consult. And they said that after Reagan was shot, that really intensified her reliance on her astrologer to keep her husband safe.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And the poor Secret Service having to kind of rearrange their schedules around Nancy Reagan's astrologer.
Yeah, I don't know if you watched that recent documentary on Showtime. It's pretty insane about everything that was going on there. Yeah, I still have bad flashbacks.
What's the documentary called?
It's on Showtime. I think it's called The Reagans. It's a multi-part series. It's pretty good. I mean, they talk about her astrology obsession and her fashion obsession as well. Pretty good.
Did you see the I think it was made for TV movie where I think James Brolin played Reagan and
Judy
Davis played Nancy?
No, I didn't see that one. I saw photos
I think
of
so.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. They were very convincing. They really looked like the two of them, but I think part of that had during the assassination attempt.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, we'll have to check out that. So before we move on, we're going to talk about the music of that time. Do you have any other just news events you remember from 81?
Well, and it's just to be in a category of news sleaze factor was the Wonderland murders that John Holmes was involved with, which has been, you know, portrayed in like Boogie Nights and other films like the one of Val Kilmer. That was a pretty big event in LA history, in the dark crime history. Was with the Wonderland murders that John Holmes was involved in. Multiple people got shot. Yeah, and then like I don't know.
Oh, I forgot that was 81. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, I think that definitely adds to our sleaze factor. So thank you for being the one to introduce the sleaze. And now we got our feet wet. Okay. So music-wise, what are your memories of the top songs of 1981? Or what you were just listening to back then?
Well, it was kind of like a combination of what I was into back then, but then like subsequently, you know, bands that I've always been into, like I've always been more of an Anglophile in music taste. So in 81, it was a pretty big year for, you know, English, British musicians that were using synthesizers, you know, bands like, you know, The Human League, been around since the late 70s, but that was their year when they released Dare, which was probably their biggest album to date. And then Soft Cell released Nonstop Erotic Cabaret. New Order, Joy Division, and became New Order. New Order released their first album that year. Yeah, it was a pretty big year and then like a lot of the post-punk bands were releasing really good albums that year. The Cure released Faith, which is one of their best albums from that period, and this is a really important year, I think, for Depeche Mode. Released their first album that year too, Speak and Spell. So it was a pretty big year for synth, early '80s
With
synth
Just
bands.
Can't Get Enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just can't get enough. Well, I think Human League, big hit. Don't You Want Me, Baby? And then
Soft Cell, Tainted Love.
Soft Cell, Tainted Love, huge hit. And that changed everything. I remember when that came out. I had the 12-inch single of that. I think I got back then.
Yeah.
Well, you covered a lot of what I was noticing, and you want to also mention Gen X had been around, but they put out an album in '81, Kiss Me Deadly, and that had Dancing with Myself, that Billy Idol re-released, as a solo singer. But he also, in that same year, put out his first album. I think it was an EP, and that's where he first recorded Moni Moni. So he kind of came out strong in '81. And Weird Al Yankovic put out his debut EP, Another One Rides the Bus, which was a parody of Queen's Another One Bites the Dust.
Which came out a year before.
And here's a couple quickies. Okay, Stars on 45. Remember that Beatles medley to the disco beat? Stars on 45. Rick James did Super Freak and Give It To Me Baby. Billy Squier was actually very hot in '81. They loved him on MTV until he did that one video where he was prancing around in his bedroom. But before that, he did The Stroke and all that kind of stuff. Vangelis, Chariots of Fire, huge movie and soundtrack. The theme to that was really big on the charts. Probably the song of the year, I think, was Betty Davis Eyes, Kim Carnes. Kraftwerk put out Computer World, which kind of, really brought in their sound to a lot more people. A Grace Jones nightclubbing album, which, I totally remember from the time. Very influential. Kim Wilde put out her debut album. This is even, I think, before Kids in America. Can you believe it's been 40 years since Kim Wilde put out an album, her first album? Yeah. Oh my God. Beauty and the Beat by the Go-Go's, very influential. A lot of women in rock. Stevie Nicks put out her solo album debut. Belladonna, Debbie Harry put out her solo album. Let's see, the Rolling Stones, Tattoo You, Start Me Up. Hall & Oates, Private Eyes. They kind of transitioned from, the Sarah Smile stuff into the quirkier. They always put everything into the new wave category. I just thought they were really cool, modern pop. The Police, Ghosts in the Machine album. Prince doing Controversy. And let me pick one more that kind of nails it. This is it. Olivia Newton-John in Physical. I mean, if you were around back then, that dominated the charts in '81. Wasn't that like, I think Kim Carnes' Betty Davis Eyes was more of Song of the Year, but I think Physical had the most time on the chart.
Yeah, probably.
Didn't break or tie the record for most weeks at number one?
Yeah, because there was into aerobics.
And believe it or not, you want to talk about sleaze, the aerobics video. Everyone thinks Olivia's so squeaky clean, but back when Physical came out, people thought that was scandalous. And some radio stations banned it, and preachers were, giving sermons about how, Olivia was leading to the moral decay of the country. And nowadays, you come 40 years later, and what's that, you got some pretty raunchy songs out there that, make Physical by Olivia just seem very tame. Do you kind of remember that when they thought that Physical was kind of raunchy?
Yeah.
Unless it's horizontally. That was a euphemism for making love in a bed. Oh, and you're from New York, or you're in the New York area. Remember when
Yeah.
Tom Tom Club came out?
Yeah,
Kind of
that
a
came out
side
that year
project
too.
from one of the
Mm-hmm.
members of
Yeah,
yeah,
Tina,
what was her
and
name? Wasn't she the
Tina
bass player?
Weymouth. Yeah, Tina Weymouth or Weymouth. I
Tina
don't know,
Weymouth
Weymouth or
from
yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, Talking Heads, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really influential. Oh god, and a horrible one. Not horrible. But what really also dominated 81 radio was Keep On Loving You by REO Speedwagon.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
people either like loved them or hated them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't hate them, but you were just bombarded with them in the suburbs, You couldn't get away from it. Oh, Blondie
Mm-hmm.
had a big hit, Rapture, which they say
Mm-hmm.
was maybe the first #1 hit to incorporate rap,
Mm-hmm.
even though Rapper's Delight had already been out.
Mm-hmm.
And Joan Jett broke through with I
Mm-hmm.
Love Rock and
Mm-hmm.
Roll. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Any other songs or just music you can remember from 81?
Journey's album Escape was big. Don't Stop Believing, that song came out that year from that album, and
Oh my
Who's
God.
Crying Now? Yeah, I had it on an 8-track tape. We're still buying 8-track tapes in the early '80s, so I had that on 8-track.
If it weren't for that song, what would have ever happened to Glee if,
Oh,
if they didn't have that song to like re-record like 3 or 4 times? Isn't that the one?
wow.
Didn't Glee kind of embrace that?
Wasn't
Is
it
that the
used
one
on
I'm
the
thinking of?
wasn't Don't Stop Believing used on the last episode of the Sopranos? I think they used that. I never watched The Sopranos, but I heard that they used
Okay.
that song. I think for the very last episode. Um,
hmm And Foreigner
yeah,
was still popular. Their big hit that year
Foreigner.
was Urgent.
Yeah.
Were you
Hmm.
kind of were you a rocker back in the day?
I like the Police. Like during that time period, I like the Police. I like the Go Go's. I grew up outside of L.A.,
hmm
so Go Go's were huge where I was from, and the Police and Journey, and I got into Human League and Soft Cell. Yeah,
hmm
my
Well,
mom
one
had
thing about
physical
like 81, it was already the
tape
80s.
cards. Mm-hmm.
Right. But see, people were trying to do the transition into the 80s and everything got
Mm-hmm.
pegged new wave, whether or not it
Mm-hmm.
was new wave. But there's,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to discover the sound that would define the 80s. It was like post disco. People were moving away from that. But there was still like a lot of danceable music, but they didn't want to call it disco anymore. And I think the Knack, wasn't that 1979?
Mm-hmm.
They were kind of
78,
considered
something like
like a
that.
big kind of
78,
new
70.
wave breakthrough. Yeah. But then there's that huge backlash, and I think by 81, they were kind of going for this softer, gentler new wave. They're just watering
Mm-hmm.
everything down for,
Mm-hmm.
pop radio.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they
Yeah.
were losing the edge? Because there's all that vibrant punk rock in the late 70s, and then
Yeah.
by the early 80s, the big record labels were finding out how to dilute it for the masses.
They're diluting it with too much cocaine, probably. It's just too much coke in
For
the recording studio or whatever. There's a lot of coke going on back then.
Oh my God. Well, and the people thinking were the squeaky clean like the Go-Go's, you read their
Yeah.
accounts of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were neck and neck with the partying with all the rocker guys.
Oh, yeah. They
You
party
know who
hard.
else? Bananarama.
Yeah.
You read,
Yeah.
I think Bananarama put out a book, two of the original women,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they were party hardy back in the 80s. Okay,
Uh,
we're about to move on to movies, but before movies, we just have to do a quick rundown of TV of that era. Of my very high-tech, college ruled
mm-hmm.
notebook with my
Nice.
red pen, since it is Valentine's Day. For our Valentine's 1981 Sleaze Fest. All right, let's see here. Okay. These series debuted in 1981. Dynasty. This is a very post-Dallas, because Dallas was like the big nighttime soap opera in the late 70s, so there are all these knockoffs, and Dynasty eventually became a big hit. Hill Street Blues, The Smurfs cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
Entertainment Tonight, which was,
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize there weren't a lot of these kind of
Mm-hmm.
entertainment formats like that at the time. Give Me a Break with Nell Carter. The Fall Guy with Lee Majors.
Mm-hmm.
Simon and Simon. And Falcon Crest, another big nighttime soap opera. There were a few lasts, like that was the last year of Charlie's Angels, big hit in the late 70s. So that kind of showed how that decade was coming to an end, like tastes were changing.
Mm-hmm.
But ones that were still going strong that had already been established, Fantasy Island, Love Boat, those were at their peak. Different Strokes with Gary Coleman. But a big one that I think started in 80 but really, got big by 81 was Magnum P.I. That just had a really healthy run. Knots Landing, Solid Gold. I think that started in 80, and that was very popular in the early 80s. That's Incredible, like a watered down, Believe It or Not, which nowadays would just be a bunch of YouTube videos. People wouldn't need, who was it? Who were the hosts of that? Kathy something?
Kathy Crosby.
And some football player.
I remember I used to watch Real People as
Something
well.
Like that, yeah.
That was
and
on
nowadays,
the same time.
Real People.
Yeah, that was on the same time.
Because nowadays people don't need that middleman. They'll just post it themselves on YouTube. But back then you would actually have to make, a videotape and, send it to America's Funniest Home Videos and hope that they pick you. Isn't that just impossible to believe now? Okay, Facts of Life, big hit. Oh, 81 was the year that The Muppet Show ended. Had a good run. Here's something. They became bigger news later in the 80s, like mid to late 80s, but the PTL, featuring the Jim and Tammy Baker Show, was going strong in 81 until their big scandal hit. And then that home improvement show, This Old House, was kind of a big hit on PBS. Any others you can think of from that era?
I remember watching
favorites you had.
Real People. That's Incredible. I used to watch also the Dukes of Hazzard was really popular at that time too. I used to watch the Dukes of Hazzard on Friday nights.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Remember that one season where they replaced the two leads, like John Schneider and
Tom Wopat.
Was it Tom Wopat? I don't know. Maybe they were like negotiating their salaries, so they had two other people replace them for a season. And I think they came back.
Yeah, it was the money
crazy.
thing.
Okay, here's another one that was still a hit. WKRP in Cincinnati, still going strong in 81. Three's Company was still on. And Ted Knight in Too Close for Comfort.
Yeah. So watch that. Yeah.
Remember that? Remember those silly comedies they had back then?
With like sexual innuendos and stuff and the dialogue.
Did you like the comedies back then?
Yeah, especially when they had sexual.
Because Three's Company influenced so much. The little, the bedroom farce kind of thing.
Yeah.
They always had these misunderstandings that revolved around sex.
Yeah.
Remember John Ritter was such a big star?
Yeah, he was.
Oh my God. All right, we covered world events, music, and TV. Now we got the big one, the meat of today's podcast. Now, and we're just going to go back and forth, but I want you to throw out what you think are not only your favorites of that era, but the movies that you think were really influential, and they could have been really low-budget drive-in movies. They could have been just sleazy slasher movies of the era. But the thing we had to, couch all this in is this was the era of the backlash of the slashers. And even though, Halloween came out in 78, it really was 1980s Friday the 13th that was so popular and really made a lot of money that by 81, these people were just cranking out slasher movies to compete with Friday the 13th. And there was this whole idea that, these were very misogynistic and, just very dangerous for children to watch. In the UK, it was the video nasty scandal where a lot of movies were banned and for years couldn't even play there. And some of these movies that, I picked definitely had that stigma and the kind of that
Mm-hmm.
reputation. Um, so, think of that whole context of what was going on at the time and how maybe 40 years later, it's kind of cool how some of these have survived. And without that scrutiny, some are just seen for what they are. When you
Mm-hmm.
take it away from saying, these are going to destroy the minds of the children, some of these are actually considered classics in the genre.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your first one that you really want to hold up as, representative of 1981?
Well, My Bloody Valentine, of course. And that was a film that suffered cuts from the MPA, unfortunately, because they were I guess they were angry at Paramount. They felt that they got away for too much of the gore in the first Friday 13th, and then when the second one came out in '81 as well, that one got butchered as well. And but luckily now we got restored versions of My
Mm-hmm.
Bloody Valentine. Now you can see the full version, and it's definitely a film that's grown in stature over the year. It's got a huge cult following, and it's a fun film. It's very atmospheric,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I watched it a few nights ago. I still enjoy watching it. And then there's a
Well, it's an
film.
excellent choice.
Mm-hmm.
Did we talk about this last time we talked? Because it's Canadian, and it's always
Mm-hmm.
held up as a great example of the Canadian slasher.
Yeah, it's like a Canadian. What they call them, Canucks exploitation movies, or whatever. They have a name. They have a term for them. Canadian exploitation films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Excellent.
that's a good.
Well, you saw it three nights ago.
Mm-hmm.
What strikes you when you see it? Like, were there things you missed that you saw a couple nights ago that you kind of noticed for the first time?
Um, I mean, I haven't. It's not a film I've seen many times, so I'm still pretty new to that movie. It's probably my third time probably seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like the kind of the haircuts. I kind of watch people's haircuts in those movies. It's kind of transition of the late '70s,
Mm-hmm.
early '80s. Like women still have that sort of helmet, that Dorothy Hamill sort of helmet haircut style. In that time, and then
Mm-hmm.
and also it kind of covers characters that are kind of the blue. That's one thing I miss about the late '70s, early '80s. They would focus on characters that were blue collar. They could be even in action films like Clint Eastwood movies, like Any Which Way But Loose. These sort of like people who hang out at a truck stop and all that. They're not like the white collar. Later in the '80s, they kind of focused more on yuppie thrillers,
Mm-hmm.
but back then it was still focusing on just average people, caught up in a horrible situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well,
uh,
one thing
it's,
about it
mm-hmm,
is it takes
mm-hmm,
place in a company town where
mm-hmm,
like everyone works at the same place.
mm-hmm.
And what was the company that they all worked for?
They all worked at a mine. I forgot the name of the mine, but it was like Valentine's Bluffs, whatever they lived at. And they always would hang out at a bar. They always get
Mm-hmm.
after work, they always getting drunk with their girlfriends. And then, and then there was like this, backstory that happened years ago. So, which I guess is kind of tied into
Mm-hmm.
Friday 13th. It's like the secret, something that happened long time ago and how it affected the people and how there's like, you know, somebody that was affected by it as a child and they come back and they start, getting revenge. So I could see it as sort of a cash in, sort of
Which
like
is
the
a
Friday.
great staple of the slasher
Mm-hmm.
genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the slasher
Yeah.
genre, so much of that was based on revenge. Usually, someone
Mm-hmm.
picked on in school, then there's a
Mm-hmm.
horrible accident, and they're
Mm-hmm.
maimed or disfigured. Then they, come back to the high school reunion 10 years later, pick everyone off. What I think is so cool about My Bloody Valentine is placing it in the mine. Because when you think
Mm-hmm.
of horror, that works really well in a confined space or a
Mm-hmm.
claustrophobic space. And
Mm-hmm.
there's like kind of the warehouse of the mine or the big building,
Mm-hmm.
above. But then when they go deeper, like into the mine itself, it gets more and more claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's great. They
Did
actually
you see
shot it
the
on.
movie The
Mm-hmm.
Descent? Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Remember the movie The Descent where the women go down into
Mm-hmm.
those caves?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that kind of captured some of that same, fear of confined spaces and dark spaces.
Yeah, yeah, that's one thing I felt watching My Bloody Valentines. I felt claustrophobic whenever they're down those mines. Like it just kind of freaks me
What
out
was your
watching.
favorite kill in the movie? Because
Just
at the
hmm
time, the slashers was all about the kills, and My Bloody Valentine had some pretty creative ones in it.
like what's the nice lady Marge? She gets stuffed in a dryer, and the guy opens up the dryer and she's like tumbling in the dryer. That's a pretty nasty one there. And like the guy gets like the pickaxe through the eye. He's like comes out his eyeball sticking out. That's a pretty good one. Yeah,
It's a good
the
one.
guy gets like his face
The other
fried in
thing
a.
that was kind of charming about the movie,
hmm
oh, the fried, yeah. Is that at the bar they all go to, the little
hmm
restaurant in the
hmm
back,
hmm
kitchen in the
hmm
back?
hmm
And did someone just like take their hand and plunge his head into it, or?
Yeah, someone gets their head plunged in a thing full of hot dogs are boiling, gets his face burned, and then he gets stuffed in a freezer afterwards.
Poor
Yeah.
guy. No, I was gonna say part of what's so charming about that movie when you talk about like a small town, the small company town, but when you have to work with these people, you have to party with them at the one bar in town, but then like when there's a town event, then you all have to go to the town, the big hall where they put on all the parties. It's almost like being in perpetual high school, and having the big Valentine's party or dance, and it's just so funny to see the city with their very meager decorations or little
hmm
streamers and balloons,
hmm
and it just seems like the whole town is in this perpetual high school that they never get out of.
Yeah. And there's that one character who
Okay, that
does.
was a good one.
hmm
I was gonna say, did you see the remake?
I did. Yeah, it's entertaining. Got Tom Atkins in it. If you're a Tom
And
Atkins fan.
Mhm. And did they stick pretty close to the story? Because sometimes you don't want them to just recreate what it was. If you're going to
hmm
remake it, add something fresh, but at the same time, don't make it so different that it's not even the same story.
hmm Yeah, there were differences in the remake for sure, but I prefer the original.
Okay. Did they take advantage of modern technology to have more elaborate special effects?
Oh, definitely, yes. It's CGI. hmm Yeah.
hmm Was that better or worse? Because a purist loves the practical effects.
Me
A
too.
lot of people are just hating CGI blood sprays.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
didn't the remake have one of the guys from the Supernatural TV show?
I'm not sure. I never watched that series.
The guy who played Dean,
Hmm.
the short one. I seem to kind of remember that. All right. Any other things you'd like to add about My Bloody Valentine?
No, just if anybody who's listening to this podcast hasn't seen it, definitely check it out. There's a great Blu-ray release through Shout Factory. It's definitely worth having.
hmm Well, excellent first choice because today is Valentine's Day.
hmm
Did you do that on purpose?
I guess
So
so.
you do have you have a method to your madness.
I do.
See, that's very sly. Okay. There are so many amazing genre films from 81,
hmm
both horror and also, sci-fi, action, adventure, and just some really good iconic mainstream ones too,
hmm
and some
hmm
little indies. Here's one I'm going to start out with, okay? Let's just go big right away. John Carpenter's Escape from New
hmm
York.
hmm Yep.
Are you a fan?
I'm a huge fan of that movie, of course.
And what's so interesting about it is he was known for horror, but this was more of just an out and out action film.
hmm
And I think what was tough is, how do you market that when, he had already made Halloween? This was, I think, the year before he made The Thing and went back to
hmm
more out and out horror.
hmm
But you can just tell John Carpenter was chomping at the bit to make, action films.
hmm
And even that decade he did Big Trouble in Little China, and
hmm
he wanted to try out other things than just slasher movies.
hmm
And I admired
Yeah.
that. And what did he do? The Fog right before this?
Yes.
I think Fog was 1980.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about this is the scope was really big, not just,
Mm-hmm.
action, but the sets were bigger. It just had a bigger feel to it. It seems like he had a
Mm-hmm.
bigger budget. He could cast maybe some of his idols. I think he had some really good
Mm-hmm.
cameos by people outside his normal
Mm-hmm.
circle.
Mm-hmm.
Although it did have Kurt Russell, that he loves to
Mm-hmm.
collaborate with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I I don't think people realize, but didn't he make a movie with Kurt Russell before this about Elvis Presley?
Yeah, TV movie.
Was
Yeah.
that like a made-for-TV?
Yeah,
And
it
then,
was
of
like.
course, he put him in The Thing the next year, and
Mm-hmm.
then Big Trouble, Little China.
Mm-hmm.
A few years after that, they did Escape from L.A., kind of
Mm-hmm.
brought them back
Mm-hmm.
together.
Mm-hmm.
But this one was really special because it just felt like Carpenter, what could he do with a bigger budget? What could he do outside the horror genre while still making it really suspenseful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
that was.
since this took place in New York, where they kind of
Mm-hmm.
took Manhattan,
Mm-hmm.
the island of Manhattan, and turned it into a prison, so it's like this, the people couldn't escape, kind of like a giant Alcatraz.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think in the plot, was it the president's plane goes down there?
Mm-hmm. He gets. Yeah, it's like a terrorist organization. They take over the plane, and he's able to escape in his little pod.
In his pod, and then so a team has to go in there and rescue him.
Mm-hmm.
And so pretty much all the prisoners have created their own little world out there, and all these little subcultures and
Mm-hmm.
hierarchies. And you have Adrienne Barbeau, and she's pretty
Mm-hmm.
badass in it. And but it also allowed for some just really cool looking, it's like when you're trying to project into the future and say, okay, what will the not too distant future look like? And it's always kind of like this semi post apocalyptic kind of look going into the
Mm-hmm.
80s, the big era of the post apocalypse movies, kind
Mm-hmm.
of tied in a little bit of that. And what would people do if they just kind of had to scavenge and, take what was there? So I'm just thinking, for you in New York, do you think this could actually happen one day?
uh, I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, the
This
rich
past
people.
year, we've seen some crazy things happening.
Yeah.
I
Unfortunately,
mean,
there's
is it as far fetched as it was 40 years ago?
well, I know that. I know that. Like, I saw John Carpenter. I went to a screening of his the one he did about Mars a while back, and I know he personally hates New York City, but he's also at the time he was making a commentary about Watergate because he wrote the screenplay for it back in the '70s. So he was sort of doing a commentary about like the distrust of the president due to Watergate and also the rise of crime in urban cities like New York. But now New York has such a influence of rich people here. That can only happen if the rich people moved out, or something caused the rich people to.
Mhm.
If crime really, I mean, crime is already rising again. There's an article in the Times recently about there's more subway crime. The subway crime now is rising. So if it gets really bad again, then maybe that could happen. But it could take a while. It could take a decade if they're gonna make the city into a maximum security prison.
Mhm. What do you think of this? So on the Sex and the City reboot,
Mm-hmm.
this would solve all their problems. What if Carrie and Charlotte and Miranda's plane went down in John Carpenter's Escape from New York, like this alternate reality, and someone had to come in and save them? Can you just see like the women surviving in that violent, unpredictable atmosphere, but kind of retracing their old neighborhoods and all the shoe stores they used to go to, and
Trying to steal
just
stuff.
if they just went for it and just merged these two. Yeah,
They're
because maybe if
pillaging.
like whoever owns the rights to Sex in the City, because isn't that what Disney's doing, merging? They got the Marvel universe, they've got the Disney stuff, they've got Star Wars. they're talking about merging some of these properties together. Let's get creative and merge Escape from New York with Sex and the City.
Oh yeah, I see that. Could be like a good like Roger Corman-esque like exploitation venture. That'd be fun. Sure. You gotta get
Oh
like Mary.
yeah.
I don't know
And
if
you
she still
just
acts.
just to see them just
Like Mary Warvinoff, like
who?
who used to work at that actress Mary Warvinoff, who used to work
Oh
with
yeah.
Paul Bartle. If she's still acting, she could make a cameo. Like she have a machine gun or something. That'd be awesome.
She'd be perfect in that.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, she knows New York. I mean, I think
yeah.
wasn't she part of the Warhol scene
Mm-hmm.
back in
Mm-hmm.
early 70s?
Yeah.
She'd be
Mm-hmm.
perfect. And they'd
Mm-hmm.
have to get like Pam Grier.
Pam Grier, of course.
Cuz wasn't she in Escape from LA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of those. All right. Well, I think we made a really big uh what do you call it? An idea that Hollywood should just jump on. They'd be really stupid if they didn't jump on this.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what's your next one? What's a movie from 81 that you want to talk about?
I love the Funhouse. Toby Hooper's The Funhouse.
Oh my
That's a
god, I love that too.
Yeah, that was like his first feature film done for a studio, done for Universal, and it's a very very colorful film. It's got really interesting characters in it, and a great atmosphere too. And that at that carnival, and the creepy people that work there that terrorize the teenagers there. Yeah, it's a film that I never
Who
get
was
tired
that
of watching.
actress in it? That hmm There's
Uh,
an older actress in it. Maybe she
mhm.
plays like a fortune teller or something.
Sylvia Miles.
She was really good.
Yeah, she's
Sylvia
always.
Miles, yes.
Hmm.
And I love when, don't you love when they take, an actor with that stature and put them in a sleazy horror movie?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, she's great. She's great. She
Well,
was great
you,
in
you
every.
remember she was like in some Warhol stuff. Remember that
Hmm.
Warhol movie she was in with Joe D'Alessandro?
Hmm.
It was either Trash or Heat or one of
Hmm.
those,
Hmm. Hmm.
or maybe it was Flesh.
Yeah.
And she's just the one you just love it when you see her pop up in something. Now, another thing about Funhouse, and again, this is just a blur in my mind. I didn't Google this, but didn't they do a novelization of the movie, The
Yeah.
Funhouse?
I had the
I'm pretty
novelization
sure
of
they
it.
did. I just
Hmm.
remember seeing it in the supermarkets.
Hmm.
And I just want to say, did Dean Koontz write the novelization of
That's
that?
that's correct.
There's
I
just
had.
something where I think early in his
Hmm.
career,
Hmm.
and I
Yep.
always wondered, was it embellished? Was the novelization, did it veer off from the movie?
Yeah, I did. I read it a long time ago, but yeah. Hmm.
hmm So there's also like a whole horror subgenre that takes place in amusement parks
Hmm.
or carnivals or circuses. Can you
Hmm.
think of any other horror movies that take place at amusement parks?
Sure. Then there's been other ones or like carnivals, like well, there's a Disney movie that came out a few years later. Something Wicked This Way Comes. Did you ever see that movie? The Ray
hmm
Bradbury novel. That's kind of a creepy
hmm
movie.
That was creepy. Yeah.
Yeah, little kids being
Well,
terrorized.
there's like some more recent from the past 15 years I can think
Hmm.
of, but they're just kind of generic. Like the thing about the Funhouse is it really stands out. And a lot of the other, circusy or carnival ones since then, there's none that really stand out to me. Did that Rob Zombie movie, was it called 31?
Oh
Did
yeah,
that
I
have
still
some
haven't.
kind of carnival connection to it?
That's one I still haven't seen. A friend of mine recommended I see that one. That's on my list of watch things to
hmm
watch.
Okay. hmm What do you think of this resurgence the past, I don't know, 5 or 10 years of just all this clown based horror?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan per se.
Clowns are like the new masks. You know, instead
Right.
of scary masks, there was just this flood of clown horror, which can be good. I mean, if it's done right,
Mm,
hey. But
mm,
when there's such a flood of it, I think almost all of them just went by forgotten.
mm.
Except for there was that one. It was that just really vicious one with that one clown, which is almost all just very thick white makeup and just some big smile. You know the one. It's kind of like I think there was a sequel.
Yeah, I haven't seen
Whoever
those
made it
movies.
started with a short film, and then there's another. What is that one called?
Yeah,
I know you know the one I'm thinking of about the
I've,
guy who
s-
stalks the young woman, and
I, I
he's
haven't
just
seen
the
those.
kills in this thing are just so graphic.
Yeah, I
Okay,
haven't
it'll
seen
come to
those.
me.
I've seen the photos, but I haven't watched those movies yet.
Okay. And it's not a horror movie. It came out in the 70s. If you're thinking of
Mm-hmm.
amusement parks, do you
Mm-hmm.
remember Roller Coaster?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was in Sense-Around, and it's about
Yeah.
the guy, I think he plants a bomb on the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Yeah.
pretty fun.
Yeah.
Oh, it's funny because you're just waiting for this one moment in the movie. Um, is the bomb going to go off or not? It's not like
Mm-hmm.
this, people being killed throughout. But it also makes me think of, Final Destination.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of those had an amusement park. Like I think at the beginning they were all going on that one roller coaster, and the ones who decide not to take that ride on the roller coaster and it goes off the rails and all the people die. Do you remember that one?
I have to admit I haven't seen any of the Final Destination movies.
What? Oh my
Yeah.
God. I highly recommend them. I really do love those
Okay.
movies. And they're all pretty good. I mean, the first one was great, but some of the sequels are really good too. And, the whole concept of it is, you can't cheat death. And all these people who should have died, like on the first one, they should have been on an airplane that crashed,
Mm-hmm.
but they got off at the last minute because, I don't know, someone had a bad feeling or something. But then what happens throughout the rest of the movie, they all decide that, you can't escape death. So one by one, they
Mm-hmm.
still end up dying in very
Mm-hmm.
gruesome ways. And
Mm-hmm.
once they kind of realize that's happening, they try to escape death, but they can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
inevitable. It's like fated. So it's a very
Mm-hmm.
kind of interesting
Mm-hmm.
concept. All right, let me pick a good one for you here. By the way, I did add the Funhouse on my list. I'm sure we will have much overlap. Let's try this. Were you ever a Rocky Horror fan?
Not a huge fan. I mean, I like the film, but I never went to the shows as a teenager.
Okay. Well, the very ill-fated sequel, Shock Treatment,
I am.
came out in
Mm-hmm.
1981,
Mm-hmm.
which I have not seen, so we don't really
Yeah.
have to talk about that one. I just thought that was a nice footnote. Here's one I
Yeah.
want to talk about. Another heavyweight director, still early in his career, but this really helped him break out even more. Scanners, David
Yeah.
Cronenberg,
Mm-hmm.
1981.
Yeah.
Because he had
Yeah.
made a few movies. He had done Rabid,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and had he already made The Brood?
Yes, that was the one before the
But with
Scanners.
Scanners, okay. And I think what we all loved about Scanners at the time was the guy's head blowing up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Remember back in the day, it really didn't even matter what the whole movie was, but you just knew there was that one scene you had to see.
Mm-hmm.
And in Scanners, it's the one where they're doing that demonstration. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know if it was like telepathic or what their
Mm-hmm.
whole power was. They just had some
Mm-hmm.
kind of psychic power. But
Mm-hmm.
when they activated it, it made their veins pulse and just all
Mm-hmm.
this pressure on their brain. And when
Mm-hmm.
they were doing this demonstration, the pressure got so big his head literally exploded in his brain and all the blood splattered out. And when DVD came out and you could actually kind of freeze frame it, you
Mm-hmm.
could see that moment when it went from the guy to the dummy head. Although the dummy head was still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you remember when you first saw it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what'd you think? Was it something where at the time you thought, I have to see this movie?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I really wanted to see it. Yeah, I think that might have been David Cronenberg's
Hmm.
first like hit hit here in the U.S. was that film probably.
Hmm.
People really discovered him.
Yeah, it was a real breakout.
Mm-hmm.
Had good marketing, played the theaters. And if you kind of think of at the time, there was this whole telekinesis thing going. It started with Carrie, but then we had The Fury,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was another Brian De Palma movie
Mm-hmm.
where they just wanted to churn out telekinesis movies. But in The Fury, that had a big amusement park scene
All
where
right.
someone's
Mm-hmm.
on that ride, in
And
those spinning cars, and then those fly off and
mm-hmm.
start killing people.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in Scanners, it still had kind of a personal feel.
Mm-hmm.
It still wasn't this big scope movie. It still was this small Canadian Cronenberg film. It still kind of had his moodiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing he cast in the main role this guy who was not an actor. He was
Mm-hmm.
actually an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the movie there is some kind of art theme. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, but it could have been he used the artist's own artwork. But I think there's
Maybe.
like a really cool scene in this big artist studio.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some big funky sculpture. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's some murder. But I've heard this guy talk about it. His name was Stephen Lack.
Mm-hmm.
He was the artist. And evidently, Cronenberg cast him because of his eyes. He had these really
Mm-hmm.
big, expressive eyes. And I guess when you're doing one of these mind control movies, it really helps to have an expressive face like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't mess with this guy because he can just squint and just concentrate really hard and he can make your brain explode. That's the other thing I can't remember about the exploding head scene. Was that guy a scanner? Or was there a scanner in the room that made that happen to the guy's head?
Yeah, it was Michael Ironside's character, Daryl Revick. That's his character. He like
Michael
the heads.
Ironside.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He was good in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because what makes these movies is the villain. If you have a
Mm-hmm.
really good villain and especially a really good character actor,
Mm-hmm.
he was perfect in that. All right, moving on. So, what's your next 1981 thriller?
There, there's so many. Well, Wolfen. There were three, which you probably know, the three big werewolf theme movies that came out in '81. But my personal favorite, I love all three. My personal favorite is actually Wolfen. Um, and I don't know if you ever read that article.
Was that with based on the Whitley Strieber novel?
Mm-hmm. 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 And
Who did all like the Communion and the UFO abduction novels? Wolfen, and wasn't Albert Finney in Wolfen?
Mm-hmm. Gregory Hines was in it. Tom Noonan was in it.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. It was directed by Michael Wadley. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He directed the Woodstock documentary, and this was unfortunately his last film he ever made. He there was an article, a two-part interview article with him in Fangoria magazine about a decade ago, where there was a lot of studio interference with that film. The film was delayed, I think, about a year in its release because of the that sort of like the vision of the werewolf. They had to work on those effects much longer. So I love all the all the shot, they shot a lot of it in the South Bronx, back when the South Bronx was like like a hellhole, all the rubble and everything like that. They really incorporated that, to great effect in that film. They really give that atmosphere, and there's a lot of political.
Was it also the same year as The Howling?
Mm-hmm. And American Werewolf in London.
Was that the same year as The Howling?
The Howling and also an American.
They were all 81.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They all become I guess now they're all like classics.
And is that funny? Because people talk about Hollywood, having the same idea at the same time in different movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think, they got wind of an American Werewolf in London, which is probably the bigger budget,
Mm-hmm.
of the three.
Mm-hmm.
So those always take longer. And
Mm-hmm.
then if people are kind of saying, oh, let's do a werewolf movie, they might put theirs out faster. So maybe they started it later, but it comes out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, was it John Landis did an American Werewolf in London?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He was the director, and then they had some really big special effects guy who did the special effects for the werewolf.
Mm-hmm. Rick Baker.
And who was that? Was that Rick Baker?
Rick Baker.
And I just remember at the time being Rick Baker that they were saying, you've never seen anything like this. This is bringing werewolf transformations to a new level. And they were right. We had never seen that before on screen.
Mm-hmm.
Lon Chaney in The Werewolf, it was just kind of like this time-lapse thing where he stood really still. Then they put a little more, fur on his face, filmed him, and it's more like this kind of time-lapse, transformation. But with like these other ones, with John Landis's An American Werewolf in London, you saw fingers change and you saw jaws project and you saw hair sprout on skin. And but what I was always wondering though on Wolfen, wasn't that probably the least special effects groundbreaking of the three? Wasn't it more mysterious? Like, did we see as much of the werewolf in that?
No, it wasn't really a werewolf movie, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it has wolves in it, but it's more of like kind of a political thriller in a way, and it's also kind of more of an examination of gentrification through big cities and how they change and how like communities where like kind of focuses on the Native Americans are being killed off or just being driven out altogether, from these cities, and the kind of the evil, I guess, of corporations taking over.
What were the Wolfen?
It was like Edward James Olmos character.
What were the Wolfen?
It was like Edward James Olmos plays like a Native American.
Did they shape shift?
Kind of, yeah. They would shapeshift to kill off rich people, like developers, like a Donald Trump type guy trying to take over, parts of Manhattan, gentrifying it. They're just being driven out. So it's kind of like a revenge in a way,
Okay. Well, that's interesting because horror always has the potential, to make a statement.
Yeah.
Without shoving it down your throat. And you can definitely use monsters and horror elements symbolically.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like that? Do you like when there's sort of a deeper message to a horror movie?
Yeah, well, like in that interview with
what's that one? Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like horror films with messages.
Before
big messages.
before we move on, can you think of any other werewolf movies, after that had the same impact of those three?
I mean, not really. No, for me that was sort of like the high mark, 81. Mm-hmm. And everyone since then has sort of been paying homage to those movies in some way, like in the makeup, like doing elaborate makeup effects or the tongue-in-cheek sort of like humor, postmodern humor or whatever.
The Howling had quite a few sequels,
mm-hmm.
and they got a lot of backlash because each one got more low budget and sillier. And I think by number 4, that always makes a lot of lists of some of the worst sequels of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of too bad because it did become kind of campy. And I think it's one of the things you can't skimp on. You either have to make it look really good or else it looks ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Right.
All right. I'm moving on. Do you want me to list one of my horror ones or just a wild card for you?
Like wild card's fine.
I knew you'd say that. Here we go. And this is a Lee Majors movie. The $6 Million Man. He made a movie. And I think this is between shows. He hadn't quite started The Fall Guy yet. I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But it's called The Last Chase. And on the surface, it's supposed to be like a sci-fi movie like in the future. But it's actually very car-oriented. But it's one of those ones where they were projecting the future, which now we're past the date they projected, because in 81, they were saying this is what America would be like in 2011, which is like 10 years ago now. But what's funny is if you look this up on IMDb and other people's comments are saying, oh my God, they predicted the future for real. This is predictive programming. Because it's a society that's gone through a pandemic. But they were also talking about how, remember back in the 70s, the scare that the gasoline was going to run out and fossil fuels were just going to, there wasn't going to be any more oil that we could, extract. And so in this, a near future, they banned personal ownership of cars, and they made everyone take mass transit, which, in the 70s and 80s, there was a big push for mass transit, this whole idea of carpooling. So this is like a dystopian future where the government says, no, you can have no private car ownership or boats or basically any vehicles. So in this movie, Lee Majors plays the head of this government agency that on the surface, upholds that rule. But inside, he secretly hates that because to him, and like, a lot of people, your car represents your freedom. Americans love to be, go out on the open road in their car and take a road trip, And when that's taken away, that's such a control thing, a way to control the masses. But what he's done in this movie is he's kept this sports car, actually a racing car. It's like a Porsche racing car. And I don't know how he, keeps it, hidden, but he works on it in his basement. And he's restored it. And so in the movie, he goes out on the open road to make this cross-country trip, I think out to California. And so, I don't know, it's not like Death Race 2000, but to me it feels a little bit like that, in that it's the near future and it's all based around cool cars. And he's got this really cool looking car. It's not that he goes around, running people down in it. But I think for, car fetishists, people just love a movie where it's all about the car. And this one is almost so cool. It's almost like a parody because it just looks like it came off a racetrack. It's got just this really race car design to it. But I just like the idea of these movies from that time period that tried to predict the future. And in this way, even though it kind of got panned at the time, it is interesting how it kind of nailed, this whole scare about fuel, and especially, fossil fuel's going to run out. We have to, go to alternative fuel sources, energy sources. And this whole idea of the pandemic and controlling people, through these disasters. Isn't that kind of the horror of our times now?
Definitely. Yeah, Kelly, is this particular film available? Like, is it available on disc, or is it available to stream online?
I think there might be on YouTube. It's cut up into I think 3 sections. I read on I think Wikipedia that a home video release came out, but I don't know how long ago, or if that even made it to DVD, if it was just a VHS. But at the very least, you can see a trailer online, and I think the full movie on YouTube. As of now, who knows, it could be taken off at any time, but I think you can see a really scratchy, very low grade one. It almost looks like it was recorded off TV on VHS and then digitized and put on YouTube. But boy, this car is really cool in it.
Oh, I have to check it out.
And Lee Majors, you never really saw him in a lot of, movies in the theater. He was like a TV guy. So it's kind of fun to see him starring in something. So, all right, moving on. Okay, pick a just let's get into the sleaze. Pick something with very little redeeming artistic value, but that you love.
Oh, wow, from 1981. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, talk about like a slasher film. Did you ever see Eyes of a Stranger? It had Lauren Tweez, who played Julie from Love Boat.
With Lauren Tweez.
And Jennifer Jason
from
Leigh.
Love Boat. And actually an early Jennifer Jason Leigh.
And Tom Savini did some of the
very
effects.
Good point. And it played at the theaters, but it kind of looks like a made-for-TV movie.
And it's got
What do you like about that? Because that's kind of like it would almost be like a Lifetime movie now, The Woman in Peril.
And then she's got her sister who's like...
has the classic elements of that.
And then like Jennifer Jason Leigh is like her sister. She's like, isn't she like blind and she's like, isn't she deaf or something in that movie? And she's like, she's like, impaired, handicapped in that film. And then there's that slasher guy who comes in and like tries to sexually take advantage of her when she can't see. That towards the end, it's kind of a sleazy sort of scene. And then it's got some good like Tom Savini, gore effects. Like some guy gets his head like decapitated and his head's like in a fish tank, I think, during one scene in that movie. Yeah, that's a film I remember watching as a kid on cable television, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it again soon. Just like those type of movies, like.
That's cool that Lauren Tweez did something like that. Because she had such a goody two-shoes image on Love Boat. It's always more fun to see people like that do a horror movie.
Yeah.
Just show their range.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure she got paid a good check.
Although, wouldn't that have been great to have done a... Well, did they ever do a horror episode or a slasher episode of Love Boat?
They should have.
Just maybe for one episode, they could have had a slasher on board.
They would have had to get like George Kennedy to be on there. Definitely get George Kennedy, like Death Ship or something, like some evil mystery going on. It's people being like finding their bodies hanging in the shower or in the closet. Yeah, that would have been awesome. Or Fantasy Island. Imagine like a Fantasy Island like slasher, like a Giallo or something.
Well, there was something kind of like that. It wasn't, the fantasy Rourke thing, but remember about 10 years ago, it was on TV, and I love this. This is like before that TV series called Slasher. But this was, I think, like Harper's Island. Do you remember that?
Mm-mm.
Which I loved. And to me, this was even, predated American Horror Story and just all the kind of renaissance of TV horror. But remember after American Horror Story came out, then there was a new anthology series called Slasher, which I think is made in Canada.
I never saw that.
And every season was a different story. Wow. Actually, I really liked it. I highly recommend it. This was kind of like that, but it's all about where it is kind of Stephen King in a way. Like it took place on this island where... Remember Storm of the Century when, there's an island where people live and then it closes for the season for the tourists and they can only get on and off through a little boat, a little foot ferry or whatever. And this kind of had that thing where a lot of people are coming to this island for something. So it's all about the locals, but then people who are just coming for an event. And somehow their access to the boat gets cut off and they're all stuck on this island with this serial killer. And the hardest thing in TV horror, it really is to maintain a scary mood. It's much easier in a theater, in a movie when you're trapped in there for 2 hours, and you can't distract yourself. But when you have horror on TV, especially when it used to be broken up with TV commercials, it was always really hard to maintain that suspense because it always got broken up. A little better now with streaming and you don't have the commercials in between. But what I liked about this series, it was genuinely scary. And they didn't skimp on the slasher movie suspense. And I think this was on CBS. So even though it couldn't be rated R and be as gritty as a rated R movie, for something on just network TV, this was actually really suspenseful.
Oh, Kelly, do you mind if I got to step away for a second? Someone's buzzing at my door. Do you mind if I got to step away for a minute? Someone's like just buzzing on my door.
Oh, please do.
All right, I'll be right back.
Yeah, well, it's Brooklyn. Be careful. Brooklyn. All right. Well, I will use the time to share my notes. See, this could last about 7 hours if we go over everything I've written, which we will not. That's just page 1. Okay. Page 2, some more movies. If time allows. Can you read my writing? There's a third page. Oh my god. It's a little easier to read. Is there a fourth? No, only 4, so we're good. I'm going to stay on page 4. It's easier to read. Oh my god. I hope Eric's not being accosted by a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman. Are you still alive? What is that? I see a cord. Eric, you're not being strangled by the cord that connects your webcam to your laptop, are you? Please say no. All right. I'm going to get my next note ready. Should I edit this part out? I don't know. In the meantime... Ooh, that's a good one. Well, let's see. Out of the ones he listed... Yeah, I had An American Werewolf in London on my list. Ooh. Got an Oliver Stone one. Do you remember what movie he made in 1981? Got a Linda Blair movie on the list. Got a Ringo Starr movie on the list. Oh, I had The Howling on my list. I had The Fun House. Okay. Oh, what else? We got a made-for-TV movie on the list.
Where's the TV at?
I had My Bloody Valentine on the list.
No, where is the box?
Oh, I got an Australian film on the list.
So you're doing it
Some German films. A Brooke Shields movie. Let's see, Barbara Hershey.
All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. We had a Sunday delivery here.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
This isn't like that show High Maintenance, where the people come and deliver pot.
No.
Was this Grubhub? Did you order like a burrito or something?
No, my girlfriend had a delivery, some package. She had a package delivered today. Some stuff that she ordered online.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the lie we're gonna believe. The girlfriend ordered it. Okay. No problem. Your secret is safe with us. Grubhub and marijuana. Okay.
Nope, none of that.
Grubhub.
I never used Grubhub. So
McDonald's cheeseburgers.
Nope.
I've never used it either. Okay. So when we were talking about this whole thing, the island and whatnot, what were we talking about first before we got onto this whole tangent? What was the main movie we were talking about?
I know we're talking about Eyes of a Stranger. I know that, and they were talking about the Lee Majors
That's
film. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we're good. Let's move on. So, 1981.
Mm-hmm.
Pick another movie. Sleazier. Come on.
There's one that's PG that's kind of sleazy. Is that okay if I talk about one that's not rated R that has sort of kind of a weird sort of Michael Crichton's Looker, well, another Albert Finney movie with Susan Day from Departures Family.
Susan Day playing a model.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And
because Michael Crichton, people, you know, when like Jurassic Park came out, people kind of forgot he had made a lot in the 70s and 80s, you know, because before that he did like Westworld. So by the time he made Looker, he had a track record already.
Yeah,
but Looker really bombed at the box office.
But I like that film.
Coma around the same time. Because
Mm-hmm.
Coma came out right before Looker.
Yeah, it was like 3 years, I think, 78 that came out. Yeah, but Looker is like, for me, like I think I like Looker a lot.
Well, what did you like about Looker?
It's just because it definitely, like, if you
what'd you like about it?
If you wanted to show someone like textbook example of early 80s aesthetic, watch Looker. It's like an early 80s thriller, you know. It's like supposed to be like this techno thriller, and he's using technology. You know, he's making a commentary about like celebrities or people getting obsessed with plastic surgery, how people are altering their appearance, and there's this thriller going on. And the music too. I like the synthesized
Mm-hmm.
like score about it. And it is kind of sort of a sleazy movie, but it's a more of a mainstream sleazy movie in a way. But with a budget. Um, um, I just think I don't think it's a bad movie at all. I think like the themes of the movie are pretty relevant today. That people are paying a lot of money to get. There's like people are being killed off in the movie, so there's like this thriller going on. But it's a good like commentary about people's obsession with their looks and what they're willing to do. Because I think it wasn't the tagline in the movie like if looks
Mm-hmm.
can kill or something like that. It's like some women's like lying on top
Mm-hmm.
of a bed of like TV screens. It's an interesting
Mm-hmm.
film.
Well, what was the premise? Like, did they have to kill people to get something to make people look better?
There's like this sinister agency, and like James Coburn, I think he's head of this agency where people can go and get their get their cosmetic surgery done, and then like these models are being killed off, by them because maybe there's some sort of secrets going on that people are revealing stuff to the public, and then that's when like Albert Finney starts investigating it, with Susan Day. Like they're like a amateur sleuths.
Mm-hmm.
They go and they break into the whatever the evil corporation there, and they're trying to figure out. And then there's like this weird like almost like was it not say I'm gonna say virtual reality, just like this weird sort of like thing where they place people inside of like artificial situations in the film too. Like there's that shootout at the end with like Albert Finney and James
Mm-hmm.
Coburn, where it's like this weird set, like a kitchen, like a generic kitchen, like a sitcom sort of set, and they find themselves like in these weird artificial sort of environments. And then like the whole scanning thing too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing where like Susan Day, they scan her whole body, and how you can like alter your appearance, in media. So I mean, I think there's some interesting things in that movie. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's a film that should be dismissed, even though whatever you want to say, it's early '80s cheese. But I think there's some interesting things about it.
Mm-hmm. And if they'd only had Instagram back then,
Right.
see, that was before you could just use an Instagram filter and
Mm-hmm.
look young and
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it is kind of funny how Instagram filters, in its own
Mm-hmm.
way, this is also some weird technological way to at least give that virtual appearance,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And how a lot of people do rely on that now. And who knows in 10, 20, 50 years how that will affect people, because now people are going to the plastic surgeon saying, hey, I want you to make me look like my Instagram filter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really creepy. Young women are
It's
doing that
crazy.
now. They're like teenagers and they're altering their appearance. It's really creepy. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Coma,
Mm-hmm.
if Crichton directed that, but that he did not write the original book though. Wasn't that Robin Cook?
Yeah, right. That's
Remember
right.
Robin Cook?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because Robin Cook wrote all the medical thrillers.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he even write one about like Contagion or some
Maybe.
virus kind of
Sounds
thing?
about
And
right.
didn't they make a
Probably.
mini series or a made for TV movie? That sounds very
Probably.
timely. Going
Probably.
back to anyone who wrote, a book about some big epidemic. All right,
Yeah.
moving on. So I'm going to get a little sleazy here. How about
Okay.
a real life sleaze, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This one is based on a true story. Death of a Centerfold, the Dorothy
Right.
Stratton story.
With James Lee
Which
Curtis.
There's actually 2 movies that came out. This is the Jamie Lee Curtis that came out in 81. 2 years later in 1983 was the big
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood one,
Mm-hmm.
Star 80,
Mm-hmm.
that had Mariel Hemingway. It is
Mm-hmm.
directed by Bob Fosse.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was very acclaimed, but when this Death of a Centerfold came out, that was much closer to Dorothy Stratton's actual murder.
Hmm.
I mean, they must have put this out, pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because Mariel Hemingway, I think, looked more like Dorothy Stratton.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jamie Lee Curtis, they did a good job, of trying to make her look as much as they could. But, Jamie Lee's a good actress. But, it's basically the story, the real life horror of a woman being controlled by an abusive boyfriend or husband. I don't even know if they were married or just boyfriend, girlfriend. But, just having this man who kind of took over her life, was also her manager. And once Dorothy Stratton got picked up by Playboy and was part of the Hugh Hefner scene, just his already kind of jealous and abusive nature went way out of control. And it's just one of those tragedies where you just, so wished she could have escaped. I mean, she did leave him, but he still found her and killed her. And, I don't know all the specifics, of the whole timeline. But it's that whole thing of once, a woman's leaving an abusive guy and tells him, she better, hopefully find a safe haven, because that's, can really set off someone. And suddenly, that's when your life really is in danger. And it's just really sad.
Yeah.
And we see too many true life stories like that. I think sometimes those are hard to see in a movie, because sometimes they hit close to home. And see that happen to so many people in real life. Right. Who was that guy? Was it Scott Peterson?
Who played the husband in
all these sleazeball guys who...
I'm sorry, the Scott
who
Peterson,
plays it?
I didn't see the TV movie. I did see Star 80 though.
Oh, that's the real life guy that killed his wife.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, that's just one of the latest of the past few years, high profile guy who kills his wife. But in this movie, I know that in Star 80, I think Eric Roberts plays the abusive guy. I don't know who played it with Jamie Lee Curtis, but to me, those real life characters are in some ways scarier, because there's something so sociopathic about that.
Yeah.
When you see a monster movie, it's a little more make believe, and you still kind of have that distance from it. When the movie's over, that there's no werewolves. But in these types of movies, that these types of people do exist.
And I think maybe the same year in
kind
81.
of ironic, too, that... Oh, maybe this is what you were just thinking. It's ironic when Death of a Centerfold came out, Dorothy Stratton's last movie came out. I think. It was called... They All Laughed.
Oh, that's what I was going to bring up. Bogdanovich.
But she was also in Galaxina. Yeah. She was in Galaxina. That was a space comedy. That was around the same time, but I think They All Laughed. And Dorothy was seeing Peter Bogdanovich. He did write a book. But then after Dorothy died, he stayed close to her sister. And I think he eventually married her sister.
That's right.
Something like that. Truth is stranger than fiction.
Did you ever read Bogdanovich's book? I think it was called Death of a Unicorn.
On.
Okay.
I can see your face.
Yes, I'm familiar with it. I never read it, but I've read interviews of him talking about it in depth. And it's very complicated, No one's a hero in this scenario, but I think what Bogdanovich really talked about well was, how do you recover from a tragedy, when the worst has happened?
Yeah.
That's why I like, some of the horror movies that are about someone where something horrible has happened at one point in their life, and maybe years later, how they're coping. Like, the last Halloween movie when they finally brought Jamie Lee back and tried to, they reignited the franchise. And what was special about that was showing this woman and how she's been affected all these years when something horrible happened, and that state of mind, and how that's just been a part of her life since. And I think that's what a lot of the fans liked about that movie, was they acknowledged that. They acknowledged, being traumatized. And I think that's another thing is, a lot of times these movies gloss over trauma. People snap back so easily sometimes. And if these things really happen in horror movies in real life, you'd be pretty darn traumatized.
Yeah, sure.
There's this really good Sigourney Weaver movie. I think it came out in the early 90s. It's the one where she was almost killed by a serial killer who I think was
Copycat?
played by. That's Copycat.
I never
Yeah,
saw
she's
this
in that
one.
restroom stall and that guy tries to strangle her.
Oh,
And
I
that
never
singer, you know the singer who sings all those standards? And he was on Will and Grace for a season. Oh, what's his name? Harry Connick Jr. was in this. He plays the serial killer
Wow.
who almost kills Sigourney Weaver. Was that Copycat?
I never saw
That's
it.
probably Copycat. And so that had already kind of happened, or they get that out of the way early. It's more about what her life has been like since then and how she's totally reclusive and never leaves her home. And it just has such this incredible fear of being attacked again. But it's kind of funny because it's before like the rest of us got internet. So it's like a movie where you see like an early thing where she, her whole life revolves around communicating through her computer, and she's got a modem, but that's when before most people had that. And just how I think the thing was murders were starting again, or either he did them or someone was copying him, and maybe they needed her help to solve the murder. So it kind of was forcing her to come out of her shell and just get beyond her trauma, to help potential victims. But she played it really well. I thought it was one of her best roles.
Yeah, I want to check it out. That's a film I want to. Isn't Holly Hunter?
Right.
Holly Hunter in that movie too?
Yeah. I think so. Maybe she's the detective or someone that approaches her to, say, "Hey, will you help us with this?" Yeah. But Harry Connick Jr., I love that they, he played against type and made him this really vicious killer in it. And I think it probably ultimately had some big showdown, where the killer, eventually comes after her. Like movies like this, that's inevitable. This sense that, she has this safe haven in her home, but, that's going to be violated, and she has to somehow overcome this to survive. Good movie. Okay. Throw another one on me. It doesn't have to be horror. Why don't you do a non-horror one?
Oh, non-horror one from 1981. I don't know. Well, a film that I haven't watched in many years, I maybe not like now, would be Arthur. That was a big comedy of 1981. I remember seeing that with my parents in the theater.
Big hit.
Yeah. But I don't know if now a film like that would be as funny because he's such an alcoholic in that movie. People might find a character like that just pathetic and sad. But back then in 81, it was like a huge, huge film.
And who played him?
Dudley Moore.
Who played Dudley Moore? That's right.
Yeah.
Because he was a big star. He had just done 10. He had this little period where he was really hot in Hollywood. And then the theme song was a big hit too.
Christopher Cross. He was very popular at that time. Yeah.
Did that win the Oscar for best song in a movie?
Might have. I think it might have in 81. Maybe. It was either that
they made
one
a sequel to it.
I was thinking it might have been that song or Shinny
Arthur 2 on the Rocks.
But also in 81, Shinny Easton, For Your Eyes Only. Maybe that song might have won Best Song that year. I'm not sure. It could have been. Both of those were probably nominated.
That was from the James Bond movie.
And that came out the same year. In 81.
I'm putting my money on Arthur's theme.
Okay.
I'm 99% sure it was theme from Arthur. But they remade Arthur a few years back with Russell Brand.
Yeah,
so
I didn't see it.
They did try to update that.
That movie bombed, though. I think the remake didn't do well.
And I think it bombed. And wasn't Helen Mirren in it?
Maybe.
Like, didn't she play what? Was it John Gielgud who played the butler in the original?
Yeah, right.
I think Helen Mirren played the equivalent of that part in the remake. Interesting casting. Well, that's a good choice. Well, if you did that, I'm going to do a non-horror. Because there are a couple of like comedies that were kind of cool. Time Bandits, Terry Gilliam.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm. That's a great movie.
And what's interesting about that, I didn't realize. Did you remember Sean Connery was in that?
Yeah, he played two roles in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Then an actress who's been in the news lately, Shelley Duvall, was in that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was in that period with The Shining,
mm-hmm.
but in 1980, and then she was in the Popeye movie with Robin Williams, and she was doing a lot back in the early 80s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So did you like Terry Gilliam? Because he really branched out to all these, very vivid fantasy films, and just, he definitely had his own style.
Yeah, I love Terry's work.
Do you remember the other movies he made?
Oh, of course. He did like Baron Munchausen.
Did he do Brazil?
Yeah, Brazil. Yeah. Baron Munchausen, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
And did he go on
Mm-hmm.
with Robin Williams?
Right, Fisher King.
Did he do that later Robin Williams movie?
Mm-hmm.
What was that one?
The Fisher King?
What Dreams May Come or something like that?
Oh, he didn't
No,
direct
it was
that.
the one where it had dreams in the title.
When he dies, his character dies, and then he comes back.
Okay, that seemed like a movie he would have done.
Yeah, he didn't direct that film, though.
Yeah, but that wasn't Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
Okay. The poor memory. And just the other, was there another one he made that I'm not thinking of?
12 Monkeys.
Was Time Bandits? 12 Monkeys, that's probably what I'm thinking of. That was a lot grittier than his other stuff. I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And,
but he got a really good performance out of Brad Pitt in 12 Monkeys.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we covered Terry Gilliam. Let's go back to the sleaze. What do you got for me? Give me a video nasty. I mean, this was the peak of video nasty era.
I mean, there were a lot of these. Well, yes, like Driller Killer, I think might have been released in the theaters around that time, maybe because I know it was like shot in the late '70s, maybe '81. Maybe it was given a more wider release. I don't know. In '81, I'm not sure. Well, Miss 45. Let's say Miss 45
that
definitely came out that year.
A lot of those.
Yeah, but Miss 45 that came out that year. I don't know if that was
Ferreira.
I'm not sure if Miss 45 was a video nasty though, but that's a pretty big film that year.
But that was 81. That was 81.
Mm-hmm.
Because he went on to make.
Mm-hmm.
What was the stuff he made?
We did. You ever see Fear City? It was like Tom Berenger, Billy D. Williams, Melanie Griffith. It was sort of a sleazy Times Square set movie.
Melanie Griffith. She played the stripper in there. Yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that came out in '84, I think.
'84, and then he directed. Did you ever watch that
show?
Did
he go on to do?
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
Crime Story. Did you ever watch that series?
Did that same director?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did he direct some of that?
Yeah, Crime Story. I think he did this. He did the pilot episode, maybe, of that. Yeah.
Okay. But didn't he direct Bad Lieutenant?
Yeah, I remember seeing that when I first came out. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Because that made a big splash at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And didn't he do one of the several remakes of Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Yeah.
Didn't he do one of those?
It was probably the biggest budget film he ever did for
Warner
Brothers.
Wasn't like Meg Tilly in it?
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and wasn't Meg Tilly in it?
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth seeing. It's good. It stands up. I watched it a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It's pretty good. Yeah.
Because it's really tough to do a remake of that because, the 1978 remake was so good. But then by the time there was that one with Nicole Kidman.
I never saw that one, yeah.
Which I just hated.
Mm.
And Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
I think. Well, I'm glad Abel's was able. All right, I'm going to rattle off a few.
Mm-hmm.
And you just tell me what your memories are of these movies.
Okay.
So now once I mention these, you're going to go, oh my God, I forgot about that. So basically, the elephant in the room, the unspoken one that I know when I mention it, you go, oh, how could I have forgotten that? Just kind of the ultimate of 81 video nasty Maniac. starring Joe Spinell and Carolyn Monroe,
Mm-hmm.
with special effects by Tom Savini, and Tom Savini is an actor in it too.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Directed by William Lustig.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was really held up at the time as just the ultimate of the video nasties, just so corrupting and vile, and it really took a lot of flack.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the plot of it?
Yeah, definitely.
The guy, the sleazy guy who murders women and then scalps them, then he brings it home and he staples their scalp to the head of mannequins. And,
yeah.
Oh my God. So I read that as Tom Savini said that he was in it kind of by default. He's doing the special effects, and there's a scene where someone's head blows up because it gets blown up with a shotgun. And I guess he had made a cast of his own head. So it was easier just to cast him because he, matched the head. And when it blew up, he had all this stuff in it, so like blood and, the brain would splatter. I think he's like in the back seat of a car with a woman making out. She looks up through the windshield. The maniac's there with a shotgun, and I think shoots through the windshield, and that bullet goes through and hits Tom Savini's head, and pow. It's an amazing special effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Tom Savini was part of that. I mean, after Friday the 13th, he was in demand.
Oh, yeah. There were other films that came out the year that he did effects for, like The Prowler and The Burning. Those both came out in 81 as well. So he was in demand back then.
They did. Now, here's one thing. Okay, Prowler, that was directed by Joseph Zito. And you're right, Tom Savini did the effects. That's one thing I took an extra special note. So let's introduce that right now. This is way too much for me to write, and I just have to mention just a few little notes on this, because I think the Prowler was special for, several things. Here's the deal. Okay. It was also known by a couple other titles. One of them was Rosemary's Killer. Sounds like they're trying to cash in on Rosemary's Baby. Also, internationally known as The Pitchfork of Death. That kind of gets to the point. Farley Granger was in it. Lawrence Tierney, who I think was in Reservoir Dogs. But it had kind of like a flashback, so, a flashback to, a wartime thing. Revenge plot and blah, blah, blah. But what's really cool about it is this also took a lot of heat during the video nasty era. And let me see here. Okay. It says here that the German version omits all of the gore scenes, which includes the revelation of the killer's identity. Isn't that crazy? So the German audience, they never actually get to know who the real killer was. They also replaced the soundtrack with bird sounds for daytime scenes, cricket sounds for the night scenes, and Richard Enhorn's score with synthesizer music by an uncredited musician. So they did a lot of things, like just to remove all of the really good content, they just stripped away what probably made it really good. It says the Encyclopedia of Horror reports that Savini's particularly graphic special effects resulted in most of the murders being trimmed in the British release print. Probably because, the video nasty thing. And just to hear like some of the reviews of the time, which, most mainstream papers, they hated horror. You had to be like a Silence of the Lambs to be a good review. So already, why do they even bother? They just, it was sport for them to rip these apart. But Linda Gross of the Los Angeles Times panned the film for its violent content, adding that director Joseph Zito prowls around aimlessly without creating an authentic sense of locale. Instead, he delivers a spaced-out nightmare in which the characters act like zombies. Stephen Dusner of the Washington Post described the film as bloody, terrifying, and often sadistic. Fancy that for a slasher movie. The Prowler is a war movie reimagined as a slasher flick, and its message is clear. Take your military heroes for granted, and they will come back and kill you. Kind of in the post-Vietnam era, even though this wasn't Vietnam era movie, kind of you could, tie that in. But then the other thing is, let me go to just Joseph Zito, then we'll move on. But just to also share that, Joseph Zito, I'm surprised he's not more well-known in the genre. I think those in the know do know him. He started off in 1975 with a movie called Abduction, very sleazy. Then in 79, Blood Rage, sleazy horror. Then The Prowler in 81. But on the strength of that, he was hired to direct Friday the 13th, the final chapter, in 84. Then his career took a very odd twist. He started directing Chuck Norris in action films, starting with Missing in Action in 84, Invasion USA 85. Then he made kind of, I think, an underappreciated action flick in 88, Red Scorpion with Dolph Lundgren. So then he did Delta Force 1 in 2000, and then his really last movie was Power Play in 2003. But for my money, The Prowler, that's the one he should be remembered for. Oh, God. All right. Next. So think of another one that...
okay, Kelly, I have a good one.
Blew you away in 81.
There's one I've been meaning to talk to you about. Student Bodies. Have you seen that one?
Yes.
Because that was like one of the first
was that
like
a parody of slasher movies?
Slasher movies, yes. It was like I think it was they shot the film like it was shot in Texas, and then the guy who directed the film had some connection to Woody Allen. I think his name was Mickey Rose. I think he used to work with Woody Allen.
Oh,
Maybe
wow.
they were writers back in the day, so there's some weird Woody Allen connection in it. But that was like one of the first films that like before like Scary Movie, where the parody the popular horror films of its time. It's it's an interesting movie.
I remember the marketing for it, like the poster, and just talking about the body count. Because after a while, the slasher movie was all about the body count. And I think this one just went to absurd lengths with it.
They would like flash the number on the screen, right?
Good
like,
choice. I actually had that on my list. Yeah.
They would flash the number when someone died.
Let's see if I had like a little... Exactly. Well, there were a couple other spoofs in 81 because Friday the 13th was so big. So here was one produced by Julie Corman, Roger Corman's wife. Saturday the 14th.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what was surprising about that is some very acclaimed actors like Richard Benjamin and Paula Prentice were in that. And that's kind of a big deal to get people of their stature. And I think, weren't they married? And didn't they work on a lot of creative projects together?
Yeah, probably. That sounds right. Yeah.
But you're right, because Scream came out in, what, 97?
96. Yeah.
96? Because, this is a good, decade and a half before that. So already people were aware of, conventions of the genre. Scream didn't invent everything, but Scream was still a great movie. I'm trying to see here if there are any other kind of spoofy kind of things.
Yeah, there were other ones which I haven't
Okay, here's...
seen.
Yeah. Well, here's one. It's not a spoof, but it was a comedy. It was like a takeoff of, remember back in the 50s, the whole nuclear radiation causing giant bugs and real things happening. So there was one, The Incredible Shrinking Man. Well, in 1981, Lily Tomlin made The Incredible Shrinking Woman. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And it was kind of, I don't know if it totally flopped at the box office, but I don't think it did as well as they wanted it to.
I think maybe Rick Baker did the effects for that
Lily
film.
was
I'm
really
not
hot
sure.
off 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, she was really on a roll. 9 to
Hmm.
5 was super popular. And I think they wanted to make this kind of a social commentary at the same time. And when you look at it, I mean, it's a well-made film. It just
Hmm.
sometimes these things don't click.
Hmm.
It's just too bad. But you have to admire people for trying something different like that.
Right. Hmm.
You know, and especially for Lily, who wasn't normally in a lot of genre films.
Hmm.
I think a few years later, maybe by the mid '80s, remember that movie she did with Steve Martin, All of Me?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like she was like in his body, like it was one of those
Yeah.
body
Hmm.
swap kind of
Hmm.
things.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think you only see her like when he like looks in the mirror, she's in the mirror or something.
Hmm.
Do you kind of remember that movie?
Yeah. Hmm.
So I don't know. It's nice to see, like I said, non-genre people. I think they just should have had Lily in an out-and-out slasher movie, The Woman in Peril. Because wouldn't you have loved to have seen the big fight scene between Lily and the slasher?
Well, there's a film that she did with John Travolta called Moment by Moment, which I never seen. That would they should have maybe that film would have been more successful. If it was like a hybrid romance and then slasher film as well. Maybe.
That was 1979. It almost killed both of their
Yeah.
careers. People still wonder at the peak of his fame, Saturday Night Fever and then Grease, two hugely successful movies. They said, why did he make this movie?
Hmm.
But in '80 though, he bounced back with Urban Cowboy.
Hmm.
But did you know what in '80 he turned down American Gigolo,
Yep.
which
Hmm.
and then he turned down An Officer and a Gentleman.
And he also turned down
And who was the guy
Cruising.
in both cases?
Cruising.
That other actor got the role.
Richard Gere. Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
Richard Gere.
Hmm.
But who knows? I mean, it's
Hmm.
easy to say that after the fact.
Yeah.
So, all right, here's one. Tell me if you know this one. I'm going to try to get a little bit more obscure for you.
Okay.
Test your knowledge here. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
You know the big director Walter Hill?
Yes.
In '81, he made a movie called Southern Comfort. Do you know that one?
Yes. I saw a 35 millimeter print of it a few years ago at the Alamo Draft House here in Brooklyn. Yeah, it was my first time seeing it. I really enjoyed that film. It's a good movie.
How would you describe the genre?
I don't know what's
What
kind
would
of
you call that?
it's like what takes place in the South, right? It's like supposed to be like in the Louisiana, right? Like in the swamp and the bayous. It's sort of like these like kind of a macho sort of testosterone sort of movie, but redneck kind of characters. Like Brian James is in it, right? He's like a backwoods character in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the city folk
Yeah,
against
Keith
the
Carradine's in it.
mm-hmm,
Powers Booth.
Booth, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, it's a good
Well,
movie.
kind of in that whole era of Deliverance.
Hmm.
It's very
Right.
post-Deliverance, where that
Hmm.
was still a genre. Even like First Blood with Stallone, and
Hmm.
I don't know, there's just something in the air of, like you were saying, even the, city people against you know, the backwoods
Hmm.
people, or
Hmm.
just people being
Hmm.
thrown into a different
Hmm.
environment.
Hmm.
And, just having everything broken down to survive by your wits, and, the whole idea of, culture, and, you can't call 911. No one can protect you. You better get down to your primal self and survive.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of like 2020.
Hmm.
It is kind of interesting to see how civilized we think we are, how quickly that can be stripped away.
Hmm.
We can all get down to our very primal selves.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, let me throw another one out at you. I'm not going to say My Dinner with Andre, even though that came out that year.
Hmm.
This is one that I finally saw maybe a year ago. The Hand, one of Oliver Stone's early movies. Not his first. He made an out-and-out, even trashier horror movie before that. But The Hand had Michael Caine, so it really brought him up to a new level. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, I like that movie. I know that Oliver Stone said that he was drunk, I guess, a lot when he was making that movie. But it's fun. It's like a fun, trashy horror film. Yeah, I like The Hand because he's like,
It's well made.
yeah,
You know, it is suspenseful. Yeah.
he got like Carlo Rambaldi, the famous makeup artist guy, to do the makeup effects, or do the hand, the crawling hand, whatever they used for that film. Yeah.
The Hand was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure the people who made the Addams Family movie a few years later probably got a few tips from him.
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, here's some trivia, and I don't know the answer to it. I was reading an interview recently about there was an actor who at the time was offered that part and said years later he regretted turning that down. Like he wishes he would have done that. He said in part because he would have liked to have worked with Oliver Stone. Oh, you know who I think it was? I think it was James Brolin.
Interesting.
Because then he talked about how years later his son worked with Oliver Stone. Where I think, didn't his son, Josh Brolin, play George W. Bush?
That's right.
Okay. But I think James Brolin was offered the Michael Caine part, but wasn't it right around the same time? He had already done Amityville Horror.
That's
I think
right.
That was late 70s. But didn't James Brolin make that car movie about the
car?
The killer car, the spooky car.
Yeah.
Yeah, was that like 1980, right around then?
That was even before.
So maybe he couldn't make The Hand because he was making the car.
No, I think the car was 77, I think. That was like
79?
7, maybe. It was before Amityville Horror.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, was it? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Wasn't Amityville Horror like 78?
79. Yeah.
77?
70. I think the car was 77
79?
and Amityville Horror was 79, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right, here's one to stump you. Now that we're talking like directors, big name directors, but still earlier in their career, although not, totally early, but for Brian De Palma, his misunderstood film Blowout came out. And De Palma had a lot of success, Carrie and these other films. But when Blowout came, it was kind of, people were disappointed. It didn't do as well as, they thought it would. But it's actually received a lot more acclaim, in the years since. What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, it's a great movie. Especially if you ever get the chance to see it on the big screen, it's great widescreen movie. Vilmos Zsigmond's photography is amazing. The use of split screen. Jonathan Lithgow, he's a creepy character in that movie, and the film's got some good. The movie opens up like a sleazy movie too. He's kind of parodying the sort of slasher films of the time. At the beginning of that movie, so I think it's I love that movie. Yeah, it's great.
Because he's a sound guy. He's working on a low-budget movie, trying to get the right scream for the actress. And then he gets caught up in this very Ted Kennedy, sees this death. But he's out in the field recording live sound and then kind of witnesses a murder, but it's, I don't know. It's kind of like he has to put together the pictures from his, that he's taking on his camera, and then there's a really cool scene in it where they take the still photos and put them together in sequence, almost like a movie playing, and then add his soundtrack to it, and kind of find out the blowout is, did this car tire blow out first, or was there a gunshot before or after it blowing out? And then the kind of ironic part of at the end, he finally does get his perfect scream for the low budget horror movie, but it comes at a price. Although it's a very authentic scream, but it kind of involves the the murder of someone that he cares about.
Yeah.
Plus, there's a lot of fireworks during the big climax.
Yeah.
I bet those look good on the big screen.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see on the big screen a while back.
And wasn't that also very Hitchcockian?
Yeah, very Hitchcockian,
Yeah.
sure.
It was like a Hitchcock moment of, if, fireworks are going off, which sound like little explosions, that's a good way to mask, gunfire.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Let's see. Let's wind down to our last 5 movies, and then we'll wrap this up.
Okay, sure.
Oh my God. Okay. Here's one that I think those in the know like this, but still a lot of people haven't seen it because it's Australian. It's called Road Games, directed by Richard Franklin.
Yeah, I love that movie. I'm a big fan of
Remember
Road
that?
Games. I'm a big fan of that movie. The Dingo, with Tasty Keach with his dingo. I love that. Yeah.
Stacy Keach and then Jamie Lee Curtis is in it.
Yeah.
Very much a road movie, a big guy driving a semi and picks up Jamie Lee, and there's like a serial killer out there. It has a lot of cool elements. Doesn't it remind you a little bit of, remember Stephen King's early movie Duel?
Sure.
Scary things out on the lonely highway. But I thought it was really cool of Jamie Lee because she was already, pegged as the new scream queen back then. But this brought another level. She wasn't just the high school girl getting, stalked by a slasher. She got to have a really cool active role in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that film a lot.
Did you see the documentary Not Quite Hollywood about
Yes.
Ozploitation? And they do a nice segment talking about this movie and that director in it.
Yeah, he was interesting. Richard Franklin was a really interesting director.
And his claim to fame, when Hollywood came after him, he got to direct a very important sequel.
Yep. That came out 2 years later. Psycho 2, which came out in 1983. Yeah. That's a really good sequel.
Do you think it was on the strength of what they saw him do with Road Games that they said, yeah, this is the guy
Maybe
to do the sequel?
Well, he knew Hitchcock too, which I'm sure you know. He actually, when he kind of interned or had an apprenticeship at Universal, I guess, so he knew Hitchcock. He was sort of shadowing him for a bit, like he was sort of a Hitchcock scholar. So, yeah.
And he was the first. I mean, there's that whole trend of, Jamie Lee Curtis was Janet Leigh's daughter, the star of Psycho. And I think later on in one of the Halloween sequels, they even gave Janet Leigh a cameo. So they actually, got to be in a movie together. But, at the time, Jamie Lee was still so new and fresh. I'm sure for Franklin, to work with Janet Leigh's daughter was a big thrill.
No, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And then, the other movie in 80, though, the year before, Janet Leigh was in The Fog.
Yeah.
That Jamie Lee was in. Although I don't know, do they have a direct scene together?
They do. Not really, no. I don't think they really do.
Are they all at the church at the end?
Yeah.
What's also funny about The Fog is Jamie Lee is also a hitchhiker that gets picked up by a guy in a truck.
Tom Atkins.
I don't think it's necessarily an 18-wheeler, but Tom Atkins.
Yeah.
I think he's driving a truck at least.
Yeah.
So, all right, 4 more. I gotta really stump you.
Okay.
There are all these kind of, remember the sci-fi horror at the time? There was one called Inseminoid. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Inseminoid by
do you remember what the plot was? Was there like
Yeah, there's a woman. Doesn't a woman get like it's sort of like almost like an alien ripoff, right? Isn't she kind of get pregnant by an alien or something? And the guy who directed that film,
so.
is it Norman J. Warren? Didn't he direct that film? He's like a British filmmaker. He made like kind of a lot of schlocky horror films. I think that's the same guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it because the title's so cool.
Yeah, it's a great
Inseminoid.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great. Yeah, it's a great title.
Just when you think you used up every name,
Mm-hmm.
Inseminoid. The title just is automatic sleaze.
Yeah.
Inseminoid. Could you actually make a tasteful version of a movie called Inseminoid?
Nah, it would have to be
Oh
pretty.
my god. Okay, moving on. 3 more.
Okay.
Okay, here's one that I wanted it to be better than it was. It has some okay moments, but overall, I was disappointed. Yet it's still kind of a cult film, mainly because of the star. It's a Linda Blair movie, and she still had a good output in the late 70s, early 80s. She was cranking them out. Hell Night from 1981.
Yeah.
The cover was amazing. Remember, she's
Yeah.
climbing that gate with the big sharp tops, and she's
Yeah.
And it's like, weren't they having a costume party or something? And
Yeah. Like in a deserted mansion.
she's dressed
or
up like a
something.
can dancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think wasn't Vince Van Patten in it?
That's right. Yeah.
The son of the father from Eight is Enough.
Yeah.
But for some reason, the movie didn't click. I like Linda Blair.
Yeah.
She's really good in everything she's in. I mean, she's likable. She's fun to experience the movie through.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you just remember anything of note of that movie?
Well, I know the cinematographer was sort of like referencing Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, where they're using a lot of candlelit sort of scenes, which is sort of interesting, I guess, trying to make it look kind of arty in a way, with the low light, with the candles. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's an okay movie.
What gets me is it's called Hell Night. I wanted to fulfill that promise. That's a big promise when you call something Hell Night. And you better make this night a living hell for these characters. I just didn't think the night was hellish enough.
Yeah, right. Could have
it's
been
more like an off night. An off night where everyone got killed.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's only a couple left we're going to go over, but I'm going to group together as one film.
Okay.
Because after Friday the 13th, there was this stampede of, okay, which holidays and special events can we make a horror movie out of? Okay? So in 81, these were ones actually released in 81 that did that. Okay. If I can just find them. Happy Birthday to Me with Pamela Sue Anderson. So getting the birthday theme. Okay, another themed one. Graduation Day. Which, gotta hand it to them. That wouldn't have been my first choice of, jumping on that bandwagon. Okay, we already mentioned Saturday the 14th. My Bloody Valentine we mentioned. And by the way, Friday the 13th Part 2 came out in 81. Oh my god, I've got to find another themed one. I know I've got at least one more here. Well, oh, come on. Can we find one more from 81 that was a holiday takeoff or a special event takeoff?
Well, I know there was Halloween
Which
2.
one?
Halloween 2.
When was Mother's Day?
That might have been 81, yeah, Mother's Day.
Which, though, I think that came out in Mother's Day, maybe? Okay.
Yeah, maybe 81.
So out of all of those, which one stands out in your mind the most?
I like
Did you see Happy Birthday to Me?
Yeah, I like Happy Birthday to Me. Sure. That's a pretty good one. It's got some interesting kills in that movie. Creative kills in it.
Because that was part of the marketing of that. Was all the creative kills you were going to see in it.
And the poster was
remember
great
the poster, the shish kebab through the guy's... I know. See, nowadays, if that played on Amazon would not allow you to put that kind of artwork.
Really?
Online.
Oh,
they're really strict about that.
That's terrible. Yeah. That's horrible.
So most of these movies, the artwork would have been rejected by Amazon.
Oh, wow.
But that also had Glenn Ford, so it also had like an old-time Hollywood actor.
Yeah.
Which I appreciated.
Yeah.
And it also, we got to see Melissa Sue Anderson in a whole different light where,
yeah.
Spoiler alert for the next 3 seconds, Pamela Sue is the killer.
Yep.
Oh my God. Okay, I'll pick one or two more to wrap this up with. Let me go to my special page here. Here's a movie, and it's another rare one you don't hear talked about as much. And you don't need to talk about what they should remake, because a lot of times you don't need to remake these. Sometimes you want to remake the one that almost hit the mark but didn't quite hit the mark, and like a remake could bring it to that level.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that this one doesn't hit the level, because there's just something kind of cool about it. It's called The Boogans.
That's a film I've been meaning
Remember
to.
that?
That's a film I've been meaning to watch.
Boogans. Boogans.
Yeah, I know Stephen King's a big
and this
fan
is
of that
before
movie.
Critters and Gremlins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but later in the 80s, there are all these movies with funny names, like Spookums or
Spookies,
Ghoulies. Remember
Yeah.
Ghoulies?
Yep.
Spookies but a lot of it was in the wake of Gremlins, just these one-word titles, Critters. And what was that one with Michael Gross in the desert and those...
Oh, Tremors.
The creatures that burrow underground.
Yeah,
Tremors. Yeah, all those. But Boogans, that was before all that. I think it was pretty ballsy in 1981 to call a movie Boogans. You know, because you don't know if it's like a gritty horror movie or like a children's film. But anyways, this one kind of like My Bloody Valentine takes place in a mine. This is an old abandoned silver mine that the creatures wreak havoc around. But again, I don't know if you can see like a trailer for this online or whatever.
Yeah.
Or if they've done a
Blu-ray. There is a Blu-ray
re-release,
of it out. Yeah,
I'd like to go back and see that.
Yeah, it's available on Blu-ray. I know that for sure.
Okay, and Stephen King.
Like that movie. I know
I'd
he's
be
a
curious
fan.
what Stephen King liked about it. Maybe just the no nonsense. Let's create a fun monster. Let's kill people and let's do it creatively. All right. Let's do let's do just a big wrap up now. Oh my goodness. Did you know that there was a movie in 1981 called Scream? Not that we're going to talk about it. It's also known as The Outing, directed by this man named Byron Quisenberry, who is primarily known as a stuntman and a stunt coordinator. And this may have been like the only movie he ever directed. Maybe he directed one more. Isn't it funny when you just find these one-offs? They make one movie and they never direct anything ever again. All right. And let's give special notice. What do they call the runner-up?
Oh,
Like
special mention or special...
honorary mention. Let's give a few honorary mentions before we do the final. You mentioned Disney. Disney, actually, besides Something Wicked This Way Comes, this is all before they became Touchstone and branched out under different labels, but this was a big deal when they kind of put out almost an out-and-out horror movie, Watcher in the Woods with Bette Davis, which had kind of this witchy kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
That was very atypical of Disney.
You're right.
That came out in 81. There was another backwoods slasher, and again, kind of, same year as Southern Comfort, friends going out to camp or out in the woods. Just Before Dawn, directed by Jeff Lieberman.
Yeah.
Who I actually had the pleasure of interviewing a few weeks back. But George Kennedy was in this movie. Which you mentioned earlier. You gotta love George Kennedy.
Yeah.
You want to up your production value, hire George Kennedy. And Lieberman did talk about this. It's an interesting story. In retrospect, I should have just made the whole episode talking about this movie with him. Even though he's made some other amazing movies. But I think he liked this, and I think this one has a lot of esteem looking back, and people may have dismissed it, oh, just another slasher movie, that was actually very well made and just did a lot of interesting things with the genre.
Yeah.
So, anyways, honorary mention there. This is also the same year that Roger Corman produced Galaxy of Terror, starring Edward Albert, Aaron Moran from Happy Days, Ray Walston, Zalman King in his pre-Red Shoe Diary days, Robert Englund in his pre-Freddy Krueger days, Sid Haig, and Grace Zabriskie, who I think went on to be in Twin Peaks. So talk about an all-star cast. But this was also post-Alien, where it was basically a horror movie in space with lots of scary things. There was a movie called Nightmare, which is kind of interesting because back in the day, I think there were multiple movies called Nightmare. There's a lot of confusion if you're trying to research a movie called Nightmare. But this was the one directed by Romano Scavolini. There's also in the post 10, when Bo Derek became popular, she put out Tarzan the Ape Man in 81, back to back with a movie called Fantasies, a very soft-core film also directed by her husband, John Derek. The Prowler that you mentioned, but we're gonna end with this last movie that came out in 81. Again, it's a wild card. I want to stump you. So it's one, if you have seen it, we can talk about it. If you haven't, you're going to put it on your to-watch list. Hopefully watch it tonight. I bet you've seen this. You're pretty savvy. The Pit, directed by Lou Lehman, or Lou Lemon? Is it Lehman or Lemon? Lehman. And it's about this 12-year-old boy who gets picked on and kind of bullied. And he's friends with his teddy bear, and he talks to his teddy bear, and he imagines the teddy bear talking back to him. And one day out in the woods, he comes across this big pit with all these bloodthirsty creatures in it that kind of urge him to go out and either bring people to the pit and push them in so they can eat them. I can't remember if he actually kills the people and then throws them in the pit, but he basically becomes the feeder to these monsters in a pit, and it kind of shows how this bullied 12-year-old boy becomes a bloodthirsty enabler of these monsters. Does that ring a bell?
I haven't seen that one, but I've seen the poster.
Have I stumped you?
I've only seen the poster for it. Yeah.
Because this 12-year-old kid with a teddy bear.
Yeah.
But doesn't that kind of speak to what was in the minds of these filmmakers back then? I mean, I'm not one to judge, but who thinks of some of these things? How do you come up with a plot? Although in this case, this was, I think, based upon. I actually think what I was reading online is this guy wrote a script and then the director took it over and rewrote it. There's major rewrites of it. But then after the movie came out, there was a novelization of it.
Wow.
And they said the novelization more closely followed the original script, which they said was darker, and the kid was a little younger. So it's more shocking to see a younger person do this. But isn't that kind of funny how when you think you've heard every crazy plot out there, someone can come up with an even crazier plot. And I would say The Pit, that's a pretty crazy plot.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out soon.
So if we're going to bring any kind of Valentine's Day meaning, to what we've talked about today, let's wrap this up with a message to, today's young people who, this year is going to be the 20th anniversary of 9/11.
Yeah.
And just to think that this new generation coming of age, we're all born after 9/11. How can you describe to them, even 20 years before 9/11, 9/11 20 or 2001, there was this decade of 1981, 40 years ago. that there was this different consciousness. We came out of the 70s, we entered the 80s. You know, we entered the era of Reagan and new wave and new things in pop culture. But, you know, if you're an archaeologist, you know, looking back on this, you know, hundreds of years from now, what was just this whole mindset we had in 1981?
It seemed like it was well, definitely more innocent time, but it seems like the people were still having fun, you know. It was right before, like, well, that was the year also when the first major article about AIDS came out that summer. So that's sort of like right before things were really changing in the industry and stuff like that, you know. And yeah.
Well, they always said that the slashers were these cautionary tales of premarital sex. You know, don't beware of strange men. You know, beware of going out after dark and, you know, walking down dark alleyways, you know, just these precautionary tales. And then inevitably, you know, there's this new twist of, it's not just, you know, people will kill you, but if you go out and have sex, you know, you could get ill. And that, you know, that there was this last little innocent time in horror films where it was just straight out, oh, people could kill you. You know, stay the virgin because the killer won't kill you, as opposed to, oh no, maybe if you have, you know, sex, it's not the slasher who's going to get you, but, you know, the disease.
Right.
And I think it was the year before in Dress to Kill, Brian De Palma. And it wasn't AIDS, but it was, I think, the first time I saw in a film where Angie Dickinson, she has this kind of fling. She goes to the museum, kind of gets picked up by this guy. They're this very lengthy, very Hitchcockian, very flirtatious, you know, flirting in the museum. It's very well done. And she kind of goes home with him, and she has this nice time, but she's married. I think not quite feeling regretful yet, but she's kind of slipping out of his apartment and writing him a little note. And while she's at his desk, she's kind of still feeling the afterglow and feeling kind of good. And then she notices on his desk, or she opens a drawer or something, like a letter he got from like his doctor or the health department, you know, saying that he has a venereal disease. She's like, oh my God. And suddenly her bliss turns into panic, like, oh, I've got this. And oh my God. And just how everything just changes instantly. And she just needs to get out of there. And she's just frantic. And that kind of sets up for her whole murder, which happens, I think, in the next scene when she gets back to her apartment. And the famous elevator scene with the switchblade. But it kind of was like, maybe, you know, as vicious as the slashers were, there was this innocence that we just accepted these boogeymen who were just, you know, these abstractions. Maybe after 81, going into the 80s, the killers got more personality. They did become more of the Hannibal Lecters. Whereas before, maybe they were more dismissible because they were just a guy behind a mask. So maybe we can't have that innocence anymore. Yeah. There has to be a backstory of every killer now. There has to be some personalization. I don't know. That's my cheap psychology I'm throwing out. Although we've had kind of a resurgence of slashers too, that have been pretty low budget and pretty non-explanatory. You know, throw a clown mask on someone. You know, kill teenagers at a party. Maybe we've come full circle.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing I don't like. I don't like COVID horror movies. I don't think embracing the whole idea of social media and people on Zoom and Skype. To me, it's still hard to make an effective horror movie out of that. You know, if you want to bring back the, what's the genre that Blair Witch is? Found footage?
Yeah, found footage.
You know, if we're going to bring back more, yeah, I think maybe Skyping, you can incorporate a little bit more into that, but for just making a fresh horror movie out of that, I don't know. So maybe we're going to see a little dry period with slasher films until people can get back into full production that's not remotely filmed.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get people back at these little
Sure.
fraternity parties and,
Mm-hmm.
the classic, slasher movie genre where teenagers go out to the beach or they go camping and, we can't
Yeah.
fake that during COVID.
Yeah.
So, being Valentine's Day and knowing that you love My Bloody Valentine, can we do a new Valentine's Day themed slasher? Don't you think there's still a lot of possibilities with that?
Sure, yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
So what would be your ideal Valentine's Day slasher if you could map this out and Hollywood would make it for you? What would be a really good premise for a Valentine's Day slasher film?
Maybe it would
that does not take place in a mining town.
It could involve people that meet up on those sort of like meetup sites, people like hook up on different hookup sites, and then someone could be killing people, or maybe he's targeting people from his past, he's getting back at them, something like that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It'd be even sleazier if you made it Craigslist.
Yeah, Craigslist slasher, sure.
Maybe have it take place 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Because when they used to have you could find dates on Craigslist.
Yeah, sure.
I like that. That'd be a good start. Or maybe if you want to make it current, have it someone who was on a bad Craigslist date 10 years ago and something horrible happened, and now they reappear like on a meetup app.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But what would your specialty kills be? What would be your creative slasher kills?
Wow.
Because you're competing with the woman in the dryer.
I know.
In My Bloody Valentine. That was a good one.
Yeah. It's like lace the candy with something when they eat it, like their body explodes or something horrible. Incorporate some body horror with Valentine's sweets in it. Definitely. Cakes and candies and stuff like that.
And what could you do with the flowers? So somebody gets like a bouquet of roses.
And they're all like thorns. They get impaled by some huge thorn.
Impaled could be good.
Yeah.
Thorns is good. How about like a
poisonous
snake comes out of the roses?
That's good.
I don't know. What else do people give each other on Valentine's? Little stuffed animals.
Right.
Like a little killer beanie baby.
Yeah, right. They could have a bomb in it. It'll explode or something.
What's the modern equivalent? Like a bomb? Or just a Valentine card. You've opened it up and
some powder or something.
I don't know. That's a tough call.
Some acid flies out in your face and burns.
Anthrax.
Yeah.
Or if you want to make it really cool, the giallo with the black glove.
Yeah.
How about it's like a red leather glove?
Red.
Looking very Valentine, and then like a little knife, just the red. I don't know. Don't you like the twists though when it's a woman who's the killer?
Yeah.
We need more twists of those. It's so predictable when it's the guy.
Right. Yeah.
Or with how about with a new Valentine slasher? Like a woman, every man who's ever rejected her. Then on one Halloween, she kills all of them.
Yeah. That's nice.
Or how about this? A woman who was on a show kind of like is it The Bachelor? The one where he gives them the rose? Is that The Bachelor?
Something like that, yeah.
How about like a woman who had been on the show and she got voted off, or you didn't pick her? So then all the other women who are on that season with her get killed one by one, but you're not sure who the killer is.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
I don't know. The one I didn't like, and I like this show Angel with who is it? David Boreanaz,
I never
you know,
saw it.
who went on to Bones and all that. You know, it was the spin-off of Buffy.
Oh, okay.
But he ended up making a movie, I think, in 2000. It was called Valentine.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember that?
I've seen the poster for it, yeah.
It's kind of a slasher film.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't Denise Richards in that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I saw that in the theater. I think I was one of 2 people in the audience. It was so bad. It could have been good, but it was so bad. And I can't even remember what the plot was. Oh well. Can you think of any other movie that might have just the faintest Valentine's theme to it?
Well, it would be a anti-Valentine's movie, which came out in 1981, which is Possession. Did you ever see that one with Isabelle Adjani and Sam Neill?
Johnny?
Yeah, Isabelle Adjani and Sam Neill.
That was on my list because I remember it. Yeah.
And that's sort of like
there.
That's sort of like.
But wasn't that a foreign film?
It was like Polish filmmaker, yeah. And they made it in Germany at the time when the wall was still up. They shot like the wall prefigures a lot in that film. But that's sort of like an anti-Valentine's movie.
Was there a supernatural element to it?
Right. But that's like an anti-Valentine's movie.
What made it an anti-Valentine's?
It's about this couple that they're splitting up, and then all these like horrible things that happen. Like body hoarders. She's like in love with some sort of weird creature in this other apartment. And then she has like this freak out in a subway tunnel. It's like The Brood in a way. It's just like this couple, their relationship disintegrating, and how it ends up elements of horror in it as well.
So wrap up and tell me about your book. I know when we last talked, we talked a lot about your book, which is a collection of essays and different things. An Insignificant Man, but in it you also do talk about movies in different chapters too. So
yeah,
what's the movie side of your book? What kind of movies do you talk about?
I talk about like genre films from 1980, a lot of the horror stuff, and like mainstream movies too, like Airplane and like The Elephant Man that came out in 1980. Big studio films, as well as and in the musicals that came out that year too. That was like sort of the last. Hollywood was still trying to think that they can market post Grease, post Saturday Night Fever films like Xanadu and Can't Stop the Music, and those films bombed when they came out. But Fame was a successful film that year. That did well. That won the Oscar for the music. Yeah.
Irene Cara. Fame.
Yeah.
I Want to Live Forever.
Yeah.
So you also do a podcast, which I like the name.
Yeah. Yeah, I interview other artists, writers.
Erratic Dispatches.
Yeah. I interview different artists, writers.
So for your podcast, so what's your criteria? What makes you want to interview someone on your podcast? Because I know it's people in all different disciplines. It's not just writers, but what kind of turns you on, or who are the people you like to talk to?
I like to interview people that are passionate about what they're working on, and anybody who's willing to be honest about what are the biggest joys and challenges in their field of creativity, and what inspires them, and then I'm always interested in what projects they're currently working on for the near future.
Do you mostly favor East Coast artists?
No, I interviewed people from the West Coast, from the Midwest, from Canada. Interviewed a writer from England as well.
How many times have you had Fran Lebowitz on your podcast?
Fran Lebowitz. I would love to interview her. Yeah, it'd be great.
Why don't you ask her?
I don't know.
They're both New Yorkers.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think she does. She doesn't even own a computer. She says she doesn't own a cell phone or a mobile phone. So I don't know. I would have to do it in person, I guess, after the pandemic ends.
It's such a humble brag. Just to be proud of not having a cell phone. But I bet though she would use Grubhub.
I don't know. I don't know how she would do it though. I don't know. She doesn't. What she would call? Can you call a Grubhub through a phone number, like using a landline number? I'm not. Or is it all just online, like a mobile thing? I'm not sure how that works.
Probably all mobile things. So she probably has
Yeah.
to use a neighbor's phone.
I guess. I don't know.
See, but that could be what could win her over to a mobile phone.
Or maybe we should. I could.
So what do you think if Fran Lebowitz? Well, if she could, Grubhub, what do you think she would Grubhub for dinner tonight
I was thinking more like
for Valentine's Day?
I think I should pitch Fran Lebowitz to play a serial killer. Because she gets really passionate about things she hates about New York City. I think I could cast her like in a web series. Like she just slashes people, like people that whatever thing that she complains about. I think she could play the serial killer in a thing. She kills the hipsters or whatever.
Easily.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just anything that pisses her off. I don't know. I like her book. She's funny, but
Yeah.
all her humor is based on, very keen observation of humanity. But she's also just, she knows New York. I just like hearing her take on New York itself.
Yeah.
By the way, not to name drop, I did meet Fran once.
Well, yeah.
Because you know how she goes out and she talks at events. I mean, what do you even call it? Because she just comes and she has something prepared and she talks to the audience.
Oh yeah, yeah.
About stuff,
Mm-hmm.
what's on her mind, and then
Mm-hmm.
then the second half, she takes questions from the audience, and she's brilliant at that.
Mm-hmm.
She's really good at just off the cuff answering questions, and she's very funny spontaneously. I marveled at her quick wit. It's almost better than her writing, how just fast. But she was doing this little, you could get an autograph or something afterwards. So I remember they announced that, and it was like on a college campus. So right when it was winding down, I just ran out of the auditorium to where they were going to do the little meter and autograph things, just so I could be first in line. And I brought this poster, that little poster for the event, and I brought it up to the table, and I think I turned it over to the blank side. And I wasn't even sure what I was going to do. I just wanted to meet her. So I took the pen and I said, "Oh, Fran, would you trace your hand for me?" So she put her hand down on the back of the poster and took a pen and traced the outline of her hand on it. And then she signed it in the middle.
Nice.
It was kind of funny because I could just tell, like, she probably thought, what the hell is this? But at the same time, she's kind of a sport about it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I think she thought it was probably a frivolous thing. It's like, oh, what the heck? So she did it. And I always admired her for being a sport and just kind of going with the flow.
Cool.
Then I just grabbed and got out of there. "Oh, Miss Lebowitz, I don't want to take up any more of your time," because by that point there's this huge line behind me.
Mm-hmm.
All waiting to, pay tribute to Fran. But you know what? In the end, people are people, and I bet if you asked, you could get Fran on your podcast.
I want her to.
Don't you think?
I want to cast her play a psycho.
Could you?
I want her to have her play it because she does stuff with Marty, So like why can't she play? I bet she would like to play some sort of stalking people the type of people she hates around New York City. That new bar that opened up. It's so tacky.
You're on a
whatever.
nickname basis with Martin Scorsese.
Actually, I know someone who worked with
Marty.
him. I know someone who
Are you allowed to call?
worked with him. So Martin Scorsese, but yeah.
Well, his peers call him Marty.
Mm-hmm.
I think until I meet him personally, I can refer to him as Mr. Scorsese. Even Martin seems too casual. But that's just me. But I'm just teasing you. So we got to find a way for, in 2021, your retroactive New Year's resolution is to track down, if not stalk, Fran Lebowitz get her on your podcast to start with, and then cast her as a serial killer in a New York slasher.
Yeah.
What's it going to be called? You need a working title.
Wow, that's a good one. That's one I don't know. That's something I would probably have to wait until I meet Fran. I think she and I should collaborate together and think of the title together. Yeah, I think for now we'll just call it Fran. For now,
The one that's already been taken.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't call it Jason Takes Manhattan because that's been taken.
Fran Takes the Metropolis.
How about something with like Brooklyn in the title?
Hmm.
Or how about Brooklyn Bloodbath?
Brooklyn Bloodbath, sure.
Starring Fran Lebowitz.
Yeah.
Or how about I Heart Brooklyn?
Yeah.
But then it could be like a bloody heart with a knife through it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or can't you see just Fran with one of those I Heart New York t-shirts, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's the poster and she's holding a knife.
Yeah.
You could probably sell the whole concept. You just get a photo of that.
She's like killing tourists. She's like, she could slash the tourists and all the annoying tourists in Times Square. She's just like killing when they're stepping out of the out of the theaters there. She's like right there at the stage door. She's just slashing them. That'd be a good one.
Oh my God. Well, how about you just go for the obvious and call it I Hate New York?
Yeah, I Hate New York. She can call it that, sure.
What?
Post 9/11.
What was that?
9/11 New York.
That Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? Italian director. I mean, the New York Ripper.
Oh, Lucio Fulci, like a Lucio Fulci movie. Yeah.
Who did that?
Yeah. Lucio Fulci.
So that was probably the best New York slasher movie title, New York Ripper.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could just get the rights and just do an insane loose sequel and call it New York Ripper 2.
Yeah.
You know,
Fran's,
have a subtitle
Revenge.
to it, and that's what Fran. Exactly, New York Ripper 2. It's even funnier that it's a sequel right off the bat. Oh my God!
It should make the quacking sounds too.
Well, Eric, so what night?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the duck on the beach. So what special thing are you doing for your girlfriend for Valentine's Day?
We don't really have any plans as of now. We just sort of kind of play as it goes. You know, to see. Yeah, we take the holiday.
Does she like watching scary movies with you?
She likes Dressed to Kill. And,
does she like horror movies?
Dressed to Kill and The Fun House. She likes those movies. Yeah. But nothing too extreme. Like
double feature of that, a bottle of wine.
Mm-hmm.
And if you Grubhub, what Grubhub romantic dinner would you Grubhub for her?
Oh, wow. Probably, well, she likes sweets, so I probably need to get her some cheesecake, some authentic Junior's cheesecake, which is famous Brooklyn cheesecake. Get some of that.
And you, what would you order for dinner?
Wow.
Italian? Maybe some
Italian or
some baked lasagna?
Yeah, lasagna. That sounds really good. Sure, that sounds like a good dinner.
I just picture Brooklyn would probably have some really good Italian takeout.
Yeah, and a lot of good. We got good Mexican. We got better good Mexican food here as well. There's a new Mexican restaurant that just opened up in my neighborhood. They have good. It's good authentic Mexican food, not like fast food Mexican stuff. Yeah.
Nice. So if I ever go to Brooklyn, where can I get the best lasagna at?
Wow. Maybe in Bay Ridge or Bensonhurst. Those are like Italian neighborhoods you can go to. Yeah, I know they have some good old school Italian restaurants there you could check out. Have you been here to have you been to New York City before?
Yeah. New York City, but not Brooklyn.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I just went to what do you call it? I saw Phantom of the Opera.
Oh yeah.
I went to the theater district.
Mm-hmm.
I was staying in Stamford, Connecticut.
Okay.
I just came in for the day on the train.
Nice. Yeah.
So it was cool to see the stuff along the train between Stamford and whatever. I don't know, where would I have ended up, like in Union Station or
Grand Central Station.
Where do those trains end up?
Grand Central Station on like
Grand
42nd
Central
Street.
Station, yes.
42nd Street.
That's probably ended up there. But
Nice.
no, I'd love to come back. What I liked was just, it felt big. You know, when you come to New York, you just want to be in awe of how big everything feels. So it did not disappoint in that. And I think going out one night, it seemed kind of exotic at the time. It was probably like 1991, maybe?
That's the year I came here. Wow. So you
And,
came here 3 years ago? Wow. That's amazing.
And I remember going to this club, and that's when you had to take the cab everywhere. I kind of realized, and that's the easy part. It's like when they dump you somewhere, then you have to find a cab to get out of where they dumped you. Like this, suddenly you look around and go, this neighborhood's a lot more remote than I thought. But I remember someone suggested this place, and a group of us went to this place called The Iguana. Some little trendy club of the moment. And I just remember it was, they actually did have an iguana. They had this big lamp on the ceiling made out of these crystals or glass beads in the shape of an iguana. And I just remember there was like this waitress dressed up like a nurse in this very pristine white, almost fetishy nurse outfit that came by with this little rack of test tubes. She was kind of wearing it like one of those cigarette holders, And I guess with these drinks in test tubes, I think they like had food coloring or something, and you just buy a little test tube shot, which I'm sure doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but at the time it just seemed so exotic. Like, oh my goodness, New York. It's so trendy and dangerous. And then we were there for an hour, then we empty out onto the street saying, where the hell are we? We're in the middle of nowhere, and we can't find a cab, and cell phones haven't been invented yet. Or at least it felt that way. Bring us back to civilization. Where the hell are we? But it was all fun. But if I went back or could have done it over again, I think I would have spent the day going to record stores.
Oh, yeah.
Or video stores that still existed, and just, scoping those out.
Yeah. We had a lot of...
Darn it, well, Great. Well, Eric Morris Eskenazi, it's been good talking to you. I'm glad we did this follow-up, and I'm sure we'll have to do it again. But thank you for doing your research, and you really are an encyclopedia of knowledge.
Well, thanks for having me on your show again, Kelly. I really appreciate it.
Promise me... Well, you bet, and promise me that, it's going to be a special night for your girlfriend.
Yeah, we'll have a good night.
Horror movies... cheesecake, and horror movies, cheesecake, and a handwritten Valentine. How's that?
That sounds great. Definitely.
All right. Well, happy Valentine's Day.
You too.
I'll talk to you soon, Eric.
All right. Take care, Kelly. All right. Be well.